have a few introductory remarks that I always have to make. The kind of things where I tell you to turn off your cell phone, those kinds of things. I want to remind everybody what we do here. Some of you have been here before and know. Some of you may not have been here and wouldn't know. We are a planning commission. We're not the town council. By and large, the town council adopts the policies, makes the rules, adopts the law. We try to interpret those with the facts. You get an opportunity to present those facts and your arguments. Normally, the applicant will begin with 5 minutes. Other people will have 3 minutes. The applicant closes. If you wish to speak on an item, there are cards behind each of these benches. And if you would fill out the card, put the agenda item number on it, and give it to the clerk, we really appreciate that, and we'll call you in order. And I think that's pretty much enough. It's a fairly simple process. We'll look forward to hearing from you, and I think that's all I have to say on those items. If we could have a roll taken. Wendy, would you take roll, please?
Good evening. Thank you. Commissioner Erickson.
Here.
Commissioner Jensen.
Here.
Commissioner Sayoc.
Here.
Commissioner Machichi has an excused absence. Commissioner Talasfor.
Here.
Commissioner Bourgeois.
Here.
Excuse me, Vice Chair Bourgeois.
Here.
And Chairman O'Donnell.
Yes, here. We can now the Pledge of Allegiance. Mariko, would you lead us, please? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first matter we have would be the approval of the minutes of March 11th. May I have a motion? Yes, Commissioner Erickson.
I'll move to adopt the minutes as distributed.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Commissioner Talasfor. Any comments on the minutes? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Any no votes? No. It's unanimously approved. As far as written communications are concerned, I think we have a desk item. We've also received by email a number of emails from people commenting on principally one of the matters this evening. The desk item is on 15,400 Los Gatos Boulevard, and if everybody has had an opportunity to review that. We have one requested continuance, and that's on item number 1, 15928 Union Avenue. Is there any discussion or a motion on that? Yes.
I'll move to continue item number 1, 15928 Union Avenue to May 13th.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. The first public hearing is on 26 Oak Hill Way. May I have a staff report?
Thank you.
Oh, one second. I forgot one critical element. Now is the time for public communications. So public communications would be a communication on something that is not on the agenda this evening. People have 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes to comment. I'd like you to submit a card on that if you would, please, either after or before. So I think we have one speaker. Citizen Ray, do you want to speak?
Indeed.
Please do.
You know, almost used and abused. Almost.
Yeah, talk about a timely arrival. Close. First off, how wonderful to see the lady in red, okay? You know, I've been in Los Gatos for 9 years, waiting for this night. 9 years worth of participation in the public arena, dealing with that man Lortz. He's now gone. Hooray for the lady in red. okay? So we're just waiting for you to take us to the next level of the renaissance of Los Gatos in the public interest, okay? And lastly, I want to go on the public record relative to this man Lortz, okay? I listened to him a couple of weeks ago at the General Plan Advisory Committee meeting. He gave a presentation on how local government in Los Gatos works, okay? He talked for about an hour, on and on and on about him, the town council, and the developers. And not one word of the public participation in the public process. Not one word. That's Bud Looney Tune Lortz. I've been waiting all these years for the perfect nickname. Liar, loser, a little bit harsh. Well, I'm going to borrow from President Reagan and use Looney Tune. Looney Tune Lortz. Thank you.
Oh, do we have any subcommittee reports? Commissioner Bourgeois?
I have two. Last Thursday, the General Plan Advisory Committee met to discuss the background materials provided by the consultants for the General Plan update process. And we discussed all the elements and received public input. And tonight at 5:30, the General Plan Committee met, and we discussed the affordable housing strategy that was developed by the consultants.
Any other subcommittees? Commissioner Erickson?
The Historic Preservation Committee met Wednesday, March 18th, received wording for a plaque to be placed on the historic wall that's on the corner of College and East Main from the DAR that will be placed on that. Also considered the demolition of a residence at 14680 Quito Road and recommended to the DRC that it be demolished under the guidelines, and then had a study session for another piece of property that's under consideration for a renovation on Wilder Avenue.
Thank you. Any other subcommittee reports? Thank you. I think we can now go on to what is item number 2, 26 Oak Hill Way. May I have a staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assistant Planner Jennifer Savage will be presenting the report.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. The subject property is located at 26 Oak Hill Way. It's on the north side of Oak Hill Way, approximately 260 feet southwest of Jackson Street. The property is zoned single-family residential downtown. Adjacent properties contain single-family residences, and the neighborhood is a mix of 1- and 2-story homes. The property fronts Oak Hill but has vehicular access from Villa Avenue. The proposed project will result in a demolition by definition in town code. In addition, the applicant is proposing to exceed the maximum floor area ratio and is requesting reduced setbacks as permitted by town code on a non-conforming lot. The lot is non-conforming because it does not meet the minimum lot area of 5,000 square feet for the zone. The new single-family dwelling, the applicant is proposing a new single-family dwelling, a proposal to exceed the maximum floor area ratio, and the request for reduced setbacks, and they all require an architecture and site application. The application requires review by the Planning Commission because the project exceeds the maximum floor area ratio by more than 30 square feet. The applicant has provided a project description and a letter of justification. At 1,567 square feet, the project would create a residence that is 272 square feet over the maximum allowable floor area. At an FAR of 0.38, the project would create the second largest FAR in the immediate neighborhood. However, the proposal is well within the range of existing residences in terms of square footage. The immediate neighborhood is unique with its wide range of lot sizes and house sizes. The subject parcel is one of the more modest-sized lots, and the proposal is not out of character with the immediate neighborhood in terms of square footage. The applicant is proposing reduced side and rear setbacks. The non-conforming lot size again allows the applicant to request the reduced setbacks per town code. There are existing non-conforming setbacks on the property, and the proposal does not decrease the setbacks any further than they exist today. The majority of homes in the immediate neighborhood do have non-conforming setbacks. These include front, side, and rear non-conforming setbacks. Although the applicant is proposing to exceed the maximum floor area ratio, the project would create a residence that is compatible with the immediate neighborhood in terms of square footage, setbacks, and mass and scale. After the staff report was distributed and after the deadline for desk items passed, staff communicated with a neighbor, the neighbor of 176 Villa Avenue, who was not available to attend the meeting tonight. No written correspondence was submitted. She had concerns regarding the sewer lines that run through the shared driveway from the subject property to Villa Avenue. In order to address her concerns, staff is requesting or recommending that the following condition be added to the project, of which the applicant and property owner has not had a chance to review. The condition would state such: sewer requirements. The applicant shall satisfy sewer requirements to the satisfaction of the town engineer and building official prior to the issuance of building permits. This concludes staff presentation. Staff is available for any questions.
Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Bourgeois?
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Two things. One, while we're on it, I'm a little confused to see exactly what the concern was about the sewer line and how this project, if at all, would affect the shared drive.
I'm sorry, I did not give you that explanation. The neighbor had a concern regarding in the past, there was raw sewage issues running down the shared driveway. The shared driveway slopes downward from the subject property to Villa Avenue, and thus it runs down the shared driveway. There is a clean out on one of the properties that share the shared driveway, and that is where the clean out was overflowing.
But the proposed improvements really have nothing to do with the driveway or the sewer or the clean out, correct?
The project is required to install a sanitary sewer lateral cleanout if there is not one already on the property, but there's nothing in the project that triggers the replacement of sewer lines.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing no other questions, I'll ask the applicant to come forward. Is the applicant? Oh, thank you. Please identify yourself and your address.
I will. Good evening, Chair O'Donnell. I'm Mary Ann Lucchese Hamilton. I live at 26 Oak Hill Way. My husband, Doug, is the applicant. Excuse me. In 1995, I moved to Los Gatos. I'd fallen in love with this incredible community and all it had to offer. Later that year, I was able to scrape enough together to buy my own house. Even though the house, the one whose plans you're looking at tonight, was very small and funky, and it was located in an area that could best be described as going through a transition, it was very exciting for me. It meant security, and that I could become a part of this amazing community. And it was what I could afford on my own at the time. In the ensuing years, the neighborhood has enjoyed a renaissance. New owners have come in and renovated nearly all the houses, adding second stories, and restoring the exteriors to good health. I was envious of my fellow homeowners, wishing I could afford to do the same. Someday, I thought, my house will look that good as well. Then the year 2000 brought Doug to me, who's now my husband. That was fabulous, of course, but we quickly discovered that my cozy little cottage was just plain too small for two. And without going into graphic details, it only took one instance when we both had stomach flu on the same day to demonstrate that having only one small, tiny bathroom was really not sufficient. Doug and I are now here to ask you that we be allowed to expand our living space to accommodate the two of us and allow space for his two young sons when they come to visit. By our plans, you'll see that we're asking for only a modest modest addition. When finished, our house will only be 1,500 square feet, still much smaller than most family houses in town, and smaller than many in our neighborhood. In addition to creating a better quality of life for ourselves, it is our wish to improve the value of the surrounding area. Our neighbors have doubtless passed by our house each day and thought, when are they going to fix up that place? Well, we're finally in a position to be able to do so, and we'd like to bring our house up to the standards of those around us. We hope you'll consider our plans in a positive light. We're excited and eager to work with you and with town staff to create an environment that is functional, pleasant to look at, and in keeping with the neighborhood. We believe our architect, Greg Stowers, has done a wonderful job of designing our new space, and that the finished renovation will reflect the quality and aesthetic you zealously promote and protect. We appreciate your consideration, and we look forward to a positive outcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just wait 1 second. I want to advise the commission too that Greg Stowers is going to speak. So now is the time, if you wish to ask the speaker a question, please do, but do keep in mind that the architect is also here. So are there any questions of Ms. Hamilton? Commissioner Bourgeois? Commissioner Talasvor? One of you.
Why don't I ask? Ms. Hamilton, what I'm wondering, and I don't know, I know you and your husband have just heard this tonight, I think, about the sewer situation. So my question to you is, would you be able to comply with the town's request?
According to my knowledge, we have addressed that. We have provided the clean out, or what was the, yes, it has been addressed in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did that recently within the last probably 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bourgeois? Thank you very much. And I'll ask Mr. Stowers to come forward now and identify himself and say what he wishes to, and then we'll see if there are any questions.
Good evening. Greg Stowers, Stowers Associates Architects, really just here to answer any questions you may have regarding the floor area ratio or setbacks, but basically I think in line with the staff report, we feel that this is actually a fairly modest proposal, although we are asking for a few exceptions, which the exceptions really come from kind of a technical demolition rather than an actual demolition. Really the square footages we're adding to the home are remaining within the existing footprint of the house, and so we're just trying to improve its architectural character and really bring it into line with its immediate neighbors.
All right. Before we ask you any questions, let me ask for a show of hands for those of the commissioners who visited the property. So we've all visited the property. We're familiar with that and the story polling. So now, are there questions of Mr. Stowers? No questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I also have a card here from Mr. Hamilton, who is also, as I understand it, property owner or certainly a resident of the property. Mr. Hamilton, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'm Doug Hamilton. Just to address the issue of the sewer, just so you know, we have added a clean out. We did that about 4 months ago. The sewage issue that she's talking about is not from our line. It's actually from our neighbor's line, which does connect into ours farther down the driveway. So just to clear that up. Thanks.
Let me ask you a question. Since we just heard about this now, and staff apparently just heard about it shortly ago, and I have no reason to doubt what you're saying, but I'm just wondering, on a condition basis, I assume you would not have an objection if we asked the town to at least confirm the solution to the problem.
Oh, absolutely. No objection at all. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Citizen Ray, do you wish to speak? Please do.
Yes, I decided to speak. I did visit the property this afternoon. I did read the staff report. I can't find anything particularly out of line from a public interest standpoint, okay? Except two things. The staff report, as you heard tonight, used other non-conforming properties in the neighborhood as a justification for this to non-conform. And I got to tell you, that is patently unlawful to do that. So it's just constructive criticism, Ms. Rooney, constructive criticism, okay? I don't expect you to get everything straight right off the bat, okay? And also, you know, the issue of variance, the variance law in the state of California has been regularly used and abused here by that man ahead of Ms. Rooney, okay, and the staff. And tonight, it's non-existent, not even quoted, and yet there are variances, setbacks to be asked for, okay? The variance law, in a nutshell, spells out that variances are only allowed under state law if there's something physically strange about the property, okay? Size, the length, the width, what have you. In this particular case, with the steep slope, unbelievably steep slope, I think that would justify variances under the state variance law, which should have been before you tonight, okay, and was not. So that's my input, okay? Let's look forward to getting the land use process of Los Gatos up to speed in its honesty and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Citizen Ray. Are there any others who'd like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I'll ask for discussion and, at some point, a motion. Commissioner Erickson?
I'd just like to compliment the owners and their consultant on really proposing a project that is consistent with the neighborhood and would add in a positive way, I think, to the evolution of that particular neighborhood. And I would be happy to enter a motion, but would want to give my fellow commissioners a chance to comment first.
Well, let me suggest this. You can make a motion, and if there's a second, then we can discuss the motion, but it's your pleasure.
I'm happy to make the motion. It's going to be rather lengthy because there are a half a dozen issues to address, so, and given that I'm the newest commissioner, I hope that I don't blow it. Okay? Okay.
You won't be the first.
Okay. So I would move that the Planning Commission approve architecture and site application S08034 for the property commonly known as 26 Oak Hill Way with the conditions outlined in Exhibit 3 of the staff report associated with the application, and with an addition of the condition recommended by the staff that the applicant satisfy the sewer line requirements as specified by the Director of Community Development of the town, with the following conditions highlighted as a part of my motion: that the synthetic wood trim and fascia shall have a smooth finish. Second, that all of the existing trees on the subject property are to remain. And third, that the private drive accessing the project site, giving access to the project site, shall be kept open and in a safe, drivable condition throughout the construction period, and if temporary closure is required, that the proper notification is given to all of the affected parties. The motion is to approve the architectural site applications based on the following findings and considerations. First, that the proposed project is categorically exempt pursuant to Section 15303 of the California Environmental Quality Act as adopted by the town of Los Gatos because the project consists of the construction of one single-family residence. Second, that the proposed project meets the requirements of Section 2910.0930E of the Town Code for the demolition of a single-family residence, specifically that, A, the town's housing stock will be maintained since a single-family residence will be retained on the property. Second, the existing structure has no architectural historical significance based on the removal of the residence, based on the fact that the Historic Preservation Committee removed it from the Historic Resources Inventory. Third, the property owners do not wish to maintain the structure as it presently exists. And fourth, that the economic utility of the residence is not viable over the long term without the proposed changes. Third, that the proposed project meets the requirements of Section 29.40.075 of the Town Code for granting approval to exceed the maximum floor area ratio, specifically that first, the design, the sense of mass, scale, and bulk, exterior materials, details of the proposed project are consistent with the applicable provisions of the single and two-family residence design guidelines adopted by the town in October of 2008. Second, that the lot coverage, house size, setbacks, and floor area ratio is consistent with and compatible with the surrounding properties. Fourth, the proposed project meets the requirements of Section 29.10.265(3) of the Town Code for granting approval of reduced setbacks on a non-conforming lot, specifically that first, the proposed project does not decrease setbacks any further than those that exist currently on the property, and that the second, that the setbacks of the subject property are compatible with the immediate neighborhood, since the majority of the homes in the neighborhood have non-conforming front, side, and/or rear setbacks. And fifth, that the Planning Commission has, consistent with the requirements of Section 20.2150 of the Town Code, has given due consideration to all relevant matters after it finishes consideration tonight, including traffic safety and congestion, landscaping, site layout, drainage, and exterior architectural design.
Thank you. That was a very, very good maiden voyage. So, do we have a second? Commissioner Telesfor.
Yeah, I will second that. Thank you. That was very clear. One of the reasons I would is that even though our floor area ratio, we really like to adhere to that, these are guidelines. And in this particular case, because of the location, because of how this will improve the neighborhood, as Commissioner Erickson said, and because of the quality of life. And I believe also, as far as the architecture is concerned, it will actually clean up those elevations and make it become one of the houses in that very unique neighborhood. So I will second it.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? It passes unanimously. The next matter is agenda item number 3, and that involves a property located at 15,400 Los Gatos Boulevard. I'll give a moment here for people to settle out, and then I'll ask for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Associate Planner Paulson will be presenting the report tonight.
Good evening, Commissioners, members of the public. Tonight we're discussing 15400 Los Gatos Boulevard, which was most recently Swanson Ford, and prior to that was McHugh. It's located at the corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Gateway Drive. You may remember in May of 2008, the Commission held a study session that looked at the applicant's original request, which was to construct a 55,000 square foot commercial building and a PD zone change. Currently, after that meeting, they have redesigned the project, and it's currently a 40,000 square foot building, and they're currently requesting a PD zone as well. So tonight will be a recommendation to the council. The applicants also provided 2 sets of elevations. One exceeds the height limit of the zone. The height limit of the zone is 35 feet. That's option A. It is 36 feet to the roof, and there are architectural elements in the form of towers that go up to as much as 39 feet. Option B does not exceed the height limit. Both of those designs have been reviewed by the consulting architect. Recommendations are provided, and they're outlined in the staff report. There are 3 recommendations that the applicant is willing to comply with for option A. Those will also carry over to option B. And he also looked at the reduction in tower height and slight modifications to come under the 35-foot height limit, and didn't see any architecturally significant issues with that revised design. You may remember that the building in May of last year was 2 stories, fronted up within, I believe, approximately 15 to 17 feet from Los Gatos Boulevard and along Gateway Drive. The applicants modified that and moved the two-story portion of their current building to the rear of the property line adjacent to Carlton, and have included a single-story element that extends along Gateway Drive to Los Gatos Boulevard and fronts on Los Gatos Boulevard. The applicant's proposing to be permitted to use any one or a combination of the uses that are permitted in the zone. Typically, those are retail, personal service, office, both medical and professional. And they're also, during the traffic study, looked at the possibility of a 10,000 square foot restaurant. A restaurant would have to come back through a conditional use permit process if they decide to go that route. There's been some discussion relating to the ground floor portion and whether or not there should be any restrictions placed on that to be retail, to entice pedestrian traffic. The applicant is not in favor of that alternative, but the commission should consider that, and as they're formulating the recommendation, provide input regarding that issue to the council. The previous application also had 2 levels of underground parking. Currently, this one with the 15,000 square foot reduction in square footage, they only have 1 level of underground parking, which obviously has reduced the grading for the project. They meet the parking requirements for any combination of the proposed uses that they're looking to do. Generally, they have potentially a 17 to as little as 9 parking space excess, depending on what the final mix of uses would be. The traffic study was prepared by TJKM prior to the environmental document being prepared. A representative from TJKM is present, so if anyone has any questions directly relating to traffic that staff is unable to answer, there's a representative from TJKM that will be able to answer those questions. 2 things that came out of the traffic study were that the queuing for the intersection in front of Los Gatos Village Square at that intersection with Los Gatos Boulevard, that needed to be extended to a minimum of 200 feet. Parks and Public Works staff has looked at that a little more in depth, and they're actually requesting 220 feet, that be increased. Additionally, they've asked that they contribute their incremental share to Los Gatos Boulevard Blossom Hill intersection. It would be the left turn movement if you're heading north from Blossom Hill to Los Gatos Boulevard. There's only a single turn lane. That's the only segment of the intersection that has a single turn lane. The rest of them all have 2. The applicant's proposing to provide community benefit as required by town code because they exceed the 5 daily trips in AM and PM peak. The proposed community benefit that they've brought forward is to enhance and replace the landscaping in the median that currently exists on Gateway Drive. They've estimated that work will be somewhere around $60,000. We have spoke with Parks and Public Works staff, and it works out to about $10 a square foot, and they feel that's a reasonable estimation of the cost of that work for both planning and construction. The project was also reviewed by the town's consulting arborist. He concluded that the removals were appropriate, and he also provided recommendations to ensure the viability of the trees that were going to remain, mainly relating to 1 tree on the abutting property to the south, and then the multiple trees that are along Carlton Avenue currently behind the sound wall, to make sure that those are all retained. The applicants also prepared a preliminary landscape plan that will be looked at in more detail, architecture and site approval if the plan development gets approved. However, if the commission has any concerns or comments regarding that, then again, those would be helpful for the council as this moves forward. The grading has been significantly reduced from the proposal that was reviewed in May of last year, and that's predominantly because they've taken out an entire level of underground parking, which lowered that. The off-fall material will be 10,500 cubic yards for the project, and that is all associated with the underground garage. We had 2 comments on the environmental negative declaration, the mitigated negative declaration. The Regional Water Quality Control Board reviewed that. Obviously, this project has to comply with the MPDES requirements. They were concerned that the bioswale wasn't large enough in their estimation of what a good bioswale is to sufficiently deal with that. Staff has looked at it and spoke with the consultant, and there are opportunities to either extend that existing proposed bioswale or add additional measures along Los Gatos Boulevard for MPDES requirements. They will have to comply irregardless of that, and that will be dealt with at the final construction plans. Staff believes that both option A and option B are obviously drastically different from the proposal that was seen in May of last year. There's been a reduction in square footage. The visibility of the hillsides behind has been increased with the elimination of that 2-story facade close to Los Gatos Boulevard. However, staff, obviously the commission has to carefully consider, and there's a list of issues in the staff report, and I'll quickly go through those. The height and setback exceptions that are requested if option A is the preferred option. The setback exception if requested B is the preferred option. Obviously, mass and scale still and always is an issue with any projects coming through. Views of the hillsides and maintenance of those given the current proposed project. The mix of uses, pedestrian circulation, which was brought up in the previous study session, and the neighbors, some were concerned and didn't want to have access. Staff believes actually there may be some benefit to that to kind of connect the neighborhood to the shopping districts. However, the commission is free to weigh in on that however they see fit. Landscaping, as we talked about before, traffic, and also community benefit. The commission also needs to carefully consider the proposed project's consistency with the general plan, Los Gatos Boulevard plan, and commercial design guidelines. Staff's outlined some of the goals and objectives of the commercial design guidelines and the Los Gatos Boulevard plan, which have contrary goals to to each other in terms of protecting the hillside views, but trying to bring the buildings forward and things of that nature. So the commission needs to carefully look at that. There's a desk item for this matter, and staff's available if anyone has any questions.
Are there questions of staff? I'll just go down the line then. So, Commissioner Bourgeois?
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. One thing I just wanted to clarify, though, that the storyboards that are out there, those are representative of option A. Is that correct? That is correct. Okay. Okay. Secondly, I lost my train of thought here. The in the desk item, one of the comments that was brought up was safety. I'm just wondering if the police department has looked at it or commented on underground parking, and also there's that narrow kind of no man's land between the 2-story element and the sound wall, if the police department had any concerns about those.
The police department did not have any input. We can add conditions or recommendations to the council as this moves forward, that they take a fine look at that and provide recommendations on any measures they feel are necessary.
Okay,
underground parking, we have in other areas, and there will be more to come, obviously. Many people are going underground now.
Great. And then my final point of clarification at this point is the bioswale issue. There's conditions added making sure that they comply with NPDES, and you're satisfied that those meet the intent of the regional board's concerns?
They do. Those are actually in the ordinance before we receive the comments from the board. So yes, that's actually a standard condition that's required.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Telesfor?
Thank you. My clarification is on page 4 of the report, second paragraph. It says the PD ordinance indicates that the DRC may approve the architecture and site application for the project. However, when I read on page 10, when I read further that on page 10, that if we had any concerns about landscaping, that we were to address them during the architecture and site approval process. But if architecture and site is not returned to the Planning Commission, how would we have the chance to do that?
Well, on page 10, if you read it, it says to provide concerns or comments regarding future landscaping. They will be addressed and further reviewed when architecture and site application is submitted if the PD is approved. So that still entails DRC approving that. Your recommendations will be forwarded to the council.
We have to give them now. Okay. I mean, I read that, but I was just thinking, all right, I'll do it. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sayak?
Mr. Paulson, one of the desk items that we received today was a letter from Grosvenor, who owns Los Gatos Village Square, and they had made the suggestion, because of the traffic issue, that a cut through the median at the driveway for the proposed project should be explored. So my question is, has the traffic consultant had a chance to review this, and if so, if you know if they have any comments to the suggestion?
They definitely will speak to that issue, and we can either call him forward now. I forwarded that letter to Parks and Public Works, who have spoken with TJKM regarding that matter, and they can either address that now or after the hearing's been closed. It's up to you.
I suggest that we wait until the applicant speaks. So, any further questions, Commissioner Sayak? No. Commissioner Jensen?
I have a fundamental question. I just want to make sure my understanding is correct. In our staff report, we're referred to Exhibit 17 as being option A, and Exhibit 17 is a proposed ordinance for the plan development. Exhibit 18 is plans, and then we have a separate packet that's plans. And I just want to make sure that I understand which one you're telling us is A and B.
Sure, I'll give you some clarification on that. Exhibit 17 includes actually three things: the ordinance, the exhibit for the zone change, and then development plans, which are option A. Those are the ones that are 39, up to 39 feet. Option B is Exhibit 18. It's 4 pages, and that is option B.
I'm sorry, I may be completely dense, but I look at my proposed ordinance and I have a picture, I have a map, and then I have Exhibit 18, that is a plan, and then I have a separate document, the Exhibit B.
Yeah, the thicker ones are the option A, and those were meant to be, sorry if they were misplaced, but those were meant to be as part of Exhibit 17.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Erickson?
No questions for the staff at this time.
All right. I have no cards for the applicants, so shall we just move on to comments, or would Mr. Rodriguez like to say something?
Good evening. My name is Ken Rodriguez, and I'm the project architect. With me tonight is Kevin Dare from Sandhill Property Company, property owner, and Gary Lehman from the Gazzardo Partnership, the landscape architect. If I could just have my little slide presentation on, would be great. Hopefully this won't take too much of my time here.
We'll start the time when it gets set up.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, why don't we begin?
Okay. I brought in some color drawings which might help both the commission and the public visualize the project a little bit more and be a little clearer. As staff mentioned, we do have a two-story building that is located at the rear part of the site and a one-story component that is located at the front part of the site. One of the great things about this project and the PD is that it allows us to have some additional things that really benefit the project. The first one is, you can see in the green the extensive amount of landscaping that would be located on this project around the street frontages. As you know, I've done many projects up and down the boulevard, and this one will have the most landscape of anything that we've ever proposed. And it's quite significant, both on the Los Gatos Boulevard frontage, and as I mentioned, the residential street as well as Gateway Drive. The applicant, as a community benefit, is also proposing to re-landscape the sort of god-awful median here in the middle. That landscaping is pretty old. I think it was done in the late 60s. It's an ivy ground cover that's not very appropriate. So we think between that landscaping and what we're showing, there's some real incredible landscape benefits. The other thing is all of the existing trees, which are very dense at the rear, we're maintaining. And then we're infilling the holes where there are no trees existing today, which will even make it denser. And again, the reason for that is creating a buffer to the residential neighborhood. There are no exits or walkways out to Carlton Avenue or to Gateway. The reason for that is, in meeting with some of the homeowners, there are some issues with the adjacent property with people parking along Carlton and coming in to shop at the retail component there. We're trying to encourage and will encourage all traffic for the retail that would be located here in the Auto Court Plaza. Another benefit of the project is because the rear part is probably two-story office, that parking would be located completely underground through a basement, one-level basement parking located here. So again, a benefit to that is having parking underneath the ground. That allows us to have more landscaping, of course. This parking that's located here would service the retail component, which is one story right here. Here you can see a drawing of the two-story component, and that aligns with the two-story component at the project next door. And so those visually, and I'll show you a slide here that really, you can see how the height of the existing project, whether it's called the Trader Joe's, location here, and the fast food restaurant out in front, that height would be extended along with this project. So they're very comparable. You can get a real good sense of scale, as we talked about that at our meeting last year when we brought this before you as a study session item. The one-story retail component is located here and would be approximately the same height as the one-story pad building, the old DeMartini Orchard or Carl's Jr. Today. Here are some photo simulations that I thought would be good for the commission and the public to see what the project would look like and the views and vistas to the hills, which we're always attempting to protect, would look like. Here is a photo simulation of at the intersection, sitting in this car or right adjacent to it, the hillside, the existing McHugh Lincoln Mercury project. Here's another photograph at the median looking up south on Los Gatos Boulevard. You could see both the hillside and the background. This particular project would have the one-story component that would be located in the front along Los Gatos Boulevard. You could see the view of the hills, so you can see actually the difference. It's very insignificant, what's there today. And then likewise, the project here with its one-story component, and then the two-story office building in the back. And you could see the bulk of the hillside would be kept in its identical form as it is today. The only place that would be eliminated would be that little corner there where the old service bays were in McHugh Lincoln Mercury. This is a photo simulation of the two-story product and why we didn't go to it. As you recall, the commission was kind of split and asked us to explore both the two-story project up onto Los Gatos Boulevard as well as the two-story portion back at the rear of the site. We've done that. The reason that we did not submit it, as you can see, is here's a photo simulation again of the existing. If the two-story component were located up on Los Gatos.
Just 1 second. I'm going to ask you to finish, but this project obviously is more complex than the normal 5 minutes we would. But I'm very comfortable that the commissioners will have enough questions of you that you will be able to explain to us some of this. But I want everybody to be treated equally. So if you want to if you have anything in conclusion before the questions, you could say it now briefly.
I was hoping to just get through a few more slides for the commission and the public.
I'm sure you'll get questions. We all have copies of the slides here, I believe. And
you do.
We can ask about that. I'm sorry to do this, but we do want to have a sense of balance.
The only thing that I would like to say is the applicant the property owner would just like to be able to talk about the use, or we could save that for questions. But that's up to the chair.
Well, I would invite whoever wants to speak of the use to fill out a card, and it is our custom and practice to allow that person to come up. And,
Great.
And we would do that. So let's see now if we can get some questions, because I, for one, have a number of questions in my mind. So
sure.
I would invite the commissioners. Who would like to ask any questions? Commissioner Erickson?
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. So is there, from your perspective, anything of significance, either in function or design, that would be compromised in option B versus option A?
That's a really good question. This slide, and I prepared this for you in case that question was asked, shows the difference between option A and option B elevations. You can see this red line. You also have it in your packet. And that red line is the height limit at 35 feet. And you can see in option A, there's only a small tip of this tower element, this roof line, and that roof line that projects above the 35-foot height limit. As the architectural advisor mentioned, we think that that's insignificant. We also think that it matches up with the adjacent property very well. That's exactly what they've done. They've exceeded the 35-foot height limit by quite a bit with those towers and rotundas that they have at each end of the project. And option B elevations, you can see, is just slightly lower. And so this gives the commission, as well as the public, just an opportunity to look at both of them. They're both acceptable to the project applicant. I think your commission's choice of which you feel best about, we would be happy with.
Other questions? Commissioner Sayoc?
Mr. Rodriguez, you mentioned you wanted to talk about use. I'm assuming the tenant use that is that what you had
Yes.
in mind? If you could just explain to us what you guys have in mind.
Yes, I'd like to let the
1 second, please. I'm not sure Commissioner Sayoc understood. You're going to have another speaker on that subject, on uses?
if you would like, I could have him do it now or follow right behind, however you'd like.
What I would like to do is finish the questions we have on these.
Architecture,
and then
sure.
we'll ask the next speaker to talk about the uses. Commissioner Telesfor.
You bet.
So my question is about the retail along Gateway.
Yes.
Are those, I'm assuming they're going to be doors, or are they functioning doors that you have, or are they all windows?
They are not. They're all windows.
Okay.
So I think,
there's no
again,
way into the building.
no. The only way into the building would be at the front part of this, controlled in this auto court, for the retail. The reason for that is I think the public was concerned about the foot traffic back here along Carlton. Could we place doors in here with sidewalks? We could, if the commission so thought that we should do that from a retail standpoint. We also created an outdoor patio, if this is a restaurant, that would be located out here, again, looking out into the auto court and not into the neighborhood. And so that was, again, and that's the warm side of the building, too, which would be good from a sun standpoint. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioners, any other questions before I ask? Commissioner Erickson?
The central core parking area in the middle of the...
Yes.
could you remove, this is a count issue, I was trying to be sure I counted correctly. If all of that parking were removed and it were made a fully landscaped area, does it still meet the parking requirements?
No, it would not.
How much of it could be removed?
My personal feeling is I would hate to remove any, and I'll explain to you why. I think the neighborhood has said very clearly we do not want overflow traffic on Carlton. Now, not knowing what the use is, and I'll let the owner speak to that, we wanted to cover this project for any type of use. Let's say that there's a restaurant there, a family restaurant like Viva. You know, that's a high parking generator. Some of the retail, of course, in Cornerstone, I'll just use that as an example, is a low parking generator. We really don't know at this particular time what it'll be. One thing that we want to assure yourself and the neighborhood is that we have adequate on-site parking. And so that's why. I would also only say this last piece is this particular site, and you can really see it, is so overly landscaped already compared to, I think, a beautiful project next door and other projects up and down Los Gatos Boulevard, that this is going to have extensive landscaping that no other project along Los Gatos Boulevard, including Cornerstone. I went back and looked at my drawings there and sort of compared the percentages of landscaping, and this is significantly higher. So I hope that answered your question.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jensen.
Mr. Rodriguez, I'm interested in the thinking of backing the two-story portion of the commercial building onto the residential neighborhood.
Yes.
And usually you don't want to present a two-story wall to a residence. I understand from the town's perspective why you backed it off Los Gatos Boulevard, but it doesn't seem very friendly to the residences at all. And we had a desk item, or I don't know if it was included in our packet, which indicated that the other Village Square has sloping roofs and shingles, which are more residential in feeling and character. And I last night saw a project where the developer actually sloped the roof line at the border of the commercial building to the residence to match the slope of the roof. And I'm wondering if you would consider anything along those lines to attempt to mitigate the massive two-story that you have up against the residential.
Okay, that's one of the reasons I prepared this slide for you, so that you could see the two-story portion here and here of the adjacent property. Our two-story portion here has a sloped roof, very similar to this project. It also has a small circular tower element. We have sort of a square one here. We've stepped the building back. So we have sloped the roof and made it very similar to the scale and character of what's next door in the residential neighborhood. We are proposing to use a clay tile roof. Would we consider some other material, shingles? Absolutely. But I think that the clay tile roof will add a little bit of a different character up and down Los Gatos Boulevard, and that's what the guidelines have really called for. You know, a variety of different architectural styles, finishes, and materials. The other thing that we've done is we've created a lower sloped roof here that would be adjacent to this street that comes out to break the scale down, and then also this would have a sloped roof on it also. So it runs the entire length of this area here. The other thing is, if you look at the slides in your packet, those trees are incredibly dense, and our elevations try to show, and they're actually, you can see them up on here, these are the scale of the trees of what we're looking at back on the on Carlton. So as you can see, the majority of them are even taller than this building here as it exists today, and they're going to be well screened. So I think this is the right location of where to put the two-story. I'll also go back to this previous slide that we did where we debated this with the commission of putting the two-story up on the street, which really, I think, obliterates the view of the hills, and it's not something I feel comfortable with. I think that we debated this a lot with staff and the architectural advisor, yourselves, ourselves, the neighborhood, anyone that would listen to us. We talked about both options. And I really think that you can see this option of a two-story element up on the street, while there are other buildings, you know, on Los Gatos Boulevard that are two-story. I just think at this intersection it's too important and it obliterates the view when you come back and take a look at the one-story, and here's those existing trees that I was talking about. You can see how tall they are. So that was our thought in doing that.
Other questions? Commissioner Sayre?
Mr. Rodriguez, one of the comments that we had received in our packet from a neighbor was that you flip the one-story element that's currently along Gateway so that it would be adjacent to the Trader Joe complex, so that it would create another buffer for noise for the neighbors on Carlton Avenue.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you look at this, we've created an L shape. We've pocketed any noise and auto activity to Los Gatos Boulevard away from the neighborhood. So I think we've done that quite successfully with this design. And I'm not sure I understand your question exactly. Did that answer it, or?
I guess it was just more the neighbor's question. And I believe, well, I'll wait till after public comments to see if it's brought up again.
The only thing that we have that would be adjacent to the neighborhood would be this driveway down to the basement. But you can see, if you go out there today, there's roughly 8 feet of landscaping on the Trader Joe's property at the property line. We've tripled that adjacent to it. We intend on intensifying and heavy planting that's shown on the landscape plan all in here. So really what you're going to be looking at is this continuation of the landscape wrap around here, and try to both visually protect the neighborhood, but in particular protect it from sound and no penetration for pedestrians. Today, there's this access point here, so you can see the cars parked right along here at this aerial on Carlton, and you know, people utilize this to come into what was the old McGorders and the Trader Joe's, and that's something we tried to eliminate and not have on our piece.
Other questions? I have two questions. The first relates to a subject that came on early in the meeting and really related to a late suggestion, I take it, from your neighbor across the other side of the street about making if I understood the question correctly, making a cut in the median. Is that had come out earlier? Is that
yeah,
right?
it's a cut in the median on Los Gatos Boulevard.
Are you familiar with that suggestion? Because we were told that...
Joel, is that what you're thinking?
Correct.
I'd let the traffic engineer speak to that. Would we like left turns into this project? Yes. So we would love that movement, as well as doing that movement. That would be very convenient for all of us that live in Los Gatos. So I'd love that. I don't know traffic-wise that we can do that. Joel's smiling at me, so that tells me Public Works is probably not in favor of that.
I'm assuming they're not also.
Right. But the developer, I believe, would be.
Okay. The second question, I guess, I have relates to this. I think we've all viewed the property, gone out, looked at it.
Good.
I'm worried about a tunnel effect in there. And I see that you're on the horns of a dilemma. On the one hand, we could push everything forward, which you've considered. On the other hand, we seem to push everything back. Pushing everything back has some good effects for the street, the big street, but it arguably does not have good effects for Carlton. When I went by the shopping center next to you, it is true that the angled roof does soften it, and you told us that you're doing the same thing. How does the height of the rear of your property, even with the angle roof, compared to the height of the next door two-story building?
They're pretty similar. I mean, let me show you a composite view with our that composite view. You can really see the edge of that project, and just by projecting a line across, they're right at the same height. And I think that's good planning. You're right about the tunnel effect. I'm incredibly nervous about it. you know, I look at our work at the Cornerstone project where it's set back and it's heavily landscaped, and the parking is in front, which isn't always a pedestrian-friendly element, but the buildings in the back, we had these same debates with that neighborhood because those buildings, you know, backed right up to the public street along there too. And I feel more comfortable that that's a better solution than the project across the street, the Hollywood Video project, which is right up on the street. Then I go down the street next to Swanson Ford, and I see that two-story office building that's got a half a level of parking below, and it's raised up a half a level. And to me, it's really imposing on the street. It has very little landscaping setback in the front of it. It's not Los Gatos, in my opinion. So when I look at these photo simulations, this clearly is not going to be a tunnel effect. It's a very nice scaled one-story building in the front, similar to many one-story buildings on Los Gatos Boulevard. The guidelines tell us that the boulevard will change. That these older buildings that were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s will at some point get redeveloped. They will. Of course they will. The question is I think you have to have a good mix, of one-story buildings plus two-story. And when I look at the existing landscape buffer that this site has on Carlton, it's got something that none of the other projects have that back up to the residential neighborhood. As you recall, 15,200, which is the new building that just finished next to Office Depot, when we did that, we had to create a landscape. There was a small buffer back there. But some of the neighbors, wanted additional planting. I don't blame them. And those homes back right up to the parking lot. This is separated by a street and has extensive existing landscaping that we're infilling. So I really think that's the successful location for the two-story.
Let me ask you this, because really there seems to be, we're talking about two choices as if there were only two choices. I suppose there's a third choice, and that is to reduce the size of the building. And so and I'm sure that will come up. But I'd like to get your response. In other words, if you say, I understand the tension between putting it in the front and putting it in the back. I also understand the tunnel effect, which I don't like. The only solution I know, because you can move the two stories to the front, and I agree with you, that doesn't look good. You can move two stories to the back, and then you fight the tunnel issue. Or you can reduce the size. The size and the scale of this building is something that can be discussed.
Sure.
I'm sure we will discuss it.
Sure.
What do you respond to the person that says there's an easy solution to this problem, make the building smaller?
Well, I would tell anyone who asked me that, Mr. Chairperson, that there's some successes with this project, and I think will be huge successes for Los Gatos. And one thing that Bud Lortz tries to do is let's try to do a project that really people could point to and say this is working and this is good. And I think that if you take a look at this particular slide, I've already talked about the extensive landscaping. So one, if you cut the size of the building down, you eliminate the underground parking. That, to me, is not a great solution. I want to see as many cars as I can under the building and not out in front of the building. Okay, so I think that's a real positive piece. There was a couple neighbors that were concerned about security. This would be fully managed, and there would, be full camera security as well as on-site representation, policing the building. That will not be a problem, and it isn't in any of the other projects that the developer has done. So, two, you would lose the underground parking, and you would put more asphalt out here. And yes, you would cut down the building some size, but you would still have a two-story building that is still under what most of the buildings are on Los Gatos Boulevard. So I think it's a win-win. The win-win is that there's parking under this building. And yeah, the FAR is a little bit higher than this adjacent, but if you look at the scale and mass of this project, it is greater than this one. Look at the size of the two-story portion. It's only here. This is the entire length of two-thirds of the property line and nearly 100% of this property line. So I think, from that standpoint, it's highly successful. Did that make sense, or do you have more questions?
I understand the argument. I just have one follow-up. When I look at your property line, maybe I'm misunderstanding, it looks like the two-story building fills 80% of that property line.
Oh, you're talking from here to here. It does.
Yeah.
It does, but what I'm saying is the mass of it is what you're going to read from along the street. Anybody walking along here or driving along here. So what I'm saying is if you look at the length of here to here in two-story, it's significantly longer. And my point is if you put more parking, if you take the parking out from underneath the building and put it on the site like most traditional developments, this two-story component will wrap around the edge. There will be more of it. And that's what you see along Los Gatos Boulevard.
You also are asking for essentially a variance in the setback, are you not, on both of these?
At this particular corner right here, yes. Not here, just right here. And the reason for that is, again, it's a PD, and there's some trade-offs, but the trade-offs that we've given on this project are all on one side, and that is the only issue that we've talked about. And the reason for it is this part of the site is significantly lower than this part of the site, just a grade standpoint. It just falls off. So if you look at the elevations, let me find that along Gateway right here. You can see that location. I have a slide showing what what we're asking for. It's this small component that's located right here. That much extends into the setback. Here it is in this green line. So anywhere else along the project from here on, it's all within that setback. Now again,
go back to that overall picture.
Sure.
Where you have the two together. I know you had it a minute ago.
Yeah, this one here?
No,
oh.
the one without that one.
Okay, sorry.
The setback at the front of the single-story building.
Yes.
How many feet is that from the road there?
Yeah, let me show you. Let me just get my glasses.
Is that right on the correct distance?
Okay. This dimension right here, it's at its narrowest point, is 16 feet. Here at its narrowest point is 24 feet.
What is the required setback?
I think it's 10. 15, sorry.
And it's what there, about 20?
24 here, and at this point, it's closer to 35. So you can see it's a huge difference.
Okay, but let me just ask this question, which, excuse the naivete of it, but if you were to move the building forward so you didn't need that waiver of the setback in the back, what would that do to you?
Yes, it would work.
Would work?
Yeah, but again, I just wanted the commission to be sure they understood that it's only this little roof component that is on this corner where the grade drops off. That's it. Now, we could do that, but I don't think we should compromise the landscape setback where the pedestrians are walking as well. We have pedestrians on Carlton, which is here, and they're all protected by existing landscaping, and they're going to be viewing this lush green belt. This median's going to be re-landscaped, and then all of this new landscape. So anybody walking along Los Gatos Boulevard will appreciate this additional landscaping. And yes, we could take it to 15 feet. I would prefer not to, but your call.
I'm not suggesting an answer. I just want to get the answer to the question.
Sure, I'm glad you pointed it out.
Okay, we seem to have some follow-ups here. So,
good.
Commissioner Sayoc.
Just to follow up to the setback question, the staff report states that the reduced rear setback right now is at 20 feet. And so can you just show, so this is, your diagram right here shows 20 feet.
Yes, and we're at 20 feet. We're just not with the roof element. I'll tell you, let me take you through it a little slower. This is the 20-foot setback line right here. We exceed that on the first floor. Then, as you get up to a certain height, which is 20 feet and above, you need to slope back 1 foot in height in excess of 20 feet. So 1-to-1 slope, basically, okay? That's what this slope here shows. So all along the pedestrian walkway and anybody driving along Carlton will have a 20-foot setback. We meet that. It's this upper part of this slope that we encroach a little bit right here into the roof line.
Okay, so maybe either you or staff, I need some clarification because it states that the required rear setback is actually 35 feet.
At the highest point here, yes.
Okay.
As
So
you,
if you
exceed 20 feet. If we didn't exceed 20 feet, it would be 20 feet. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joel.
The required setback's 20 feet, but every foot over 1 foot adds another foot. So for option B, the required would be 35 feet. For
At the highest height.
Correct.
Yes.
For option A, it would be 39 feet, I believe.
And just so you know, I hate to keep pointing to this small plan, but I have it up here. We meet that 1-to-1 slope, which is 30 to the 35-foot height limit, all the way along here. We just don't meet it from about here on, that small part of the corner. Could that be redesigned? Could possibly be, but I think the building, right now aesthetically looks so good. It's buried behind existing evergreen trees, and I think it's going to be unnoticeable.
Commissioner Jensen?
To follow up Chair O'Donnell's question, which you may have answered, but I don't think you did, when he said there's an option 3, which is to make the building smaller. Then you argued to us that we'd lose the underground parking, but
yes,
the auto court is all parking, isn't it? I mean, it's landscape parking, but it's parking. It's surface parking.
Yes, but it's a combination of landscape and parking for this retail.
Okay.
Yes.
But it's surface parking.
Yes.
So I don't think you answered the question of option 3, except to tell us that we could have underground parking. Can you make the building smaller?
No.
And
And-
for commercial purposes?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, as you know, we came in here before with a much larger scheme, which was the developer's and the property owner's first choice. Now, at a 40,000-foot building, that meets the threshold of the office space that he needs as well as the retail space that he needs to be able to make the project economically viable and work. The reason that I made the argument, and maybe I jumped to it, and I'm sorry about that on the garage, is that's the most expensive part of this project, when you put parking underneath a grade. It's what I want to see in long-term on Los Gatos Boulevard for office projects. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's tough for retailers to go down into a parking garage to shop. But where you have an office component like we have here, it's the perfect use to do it. And so I'm saying that that's where the trade-off is, both the economic driver of what the project costs, as well as how much square footage the developer needs as a minimum to make that work with those design components. So I'm sorry I jumped to that. Yeah.
All right, other questions?
Just one.
Commissioner Telesfor?
Sort of as a follow-up to this discussion, and it's really speaking to the height of your building, and a lot of the letters address, or that's a lot of the concern. So is there a reason you couldn't lower the building?
Yes, it's at the minimum pretty much now to have retail on the ground floor and then a second-story office. And what we've done is, go back to this section, is we've looked at the minimum requirements both from a structural standpoint. You can see the roof screening. We've used low-profile HVAC units. So we've kept this building height down based upon my experience down the street. I knew that this, is always an issue, and we need to talk about it. And so we tried to anticipate, some of that. And I think you can see there's a minimum dimension here we need for the garage. We're at that. Likewise, a minimum dimension for the retail to make it viable, hopefully, whether it's a restaurant or some other kind of retail use. And then office up above, which is a lower profile than trying to do retail on the second floor or something else.
So you mentioned the air conditioning installation.
Yes.
Can you do that internal to the building?
We have done some of it, yes. We have suspended units.
Can you put some on the outside?
Well, we have some.
We're looking to reduce it just at least a little.
Well, what I'm saying is we've already anticipated low profile here, and we've done that, as well as suspended the retail component HVAC here. So I anticipated that comment, and so I think we're at pretty much our minimums here to make this work.
Other questions? There are no other questions, and I believe the gentleman sitting behind you wants to speak, but I'm having trouble reading his name, so I'd invite him up. And
Mr. Dare,
Dare,
from Sand Hill
D-A-R-E?
Property Company. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dare, as I understand it, you could speak to uses?
That's correct.
All right, and if you wouldn't mind, you just for the record, recite your address and your full name.
My name is Kevin Dare, of Sand Hill Property Company, 489 South El Camino Real in San Mateo.
Thank you.
So I want to thank the commission for hearing this item tonight. I just want to go to one slide here. So this plan was designed with flexibility in mind. You know, as you can see from these models, so let me walk you through the 4 different elements here. The top left is, this would be the building with retail on the ground floor, and that would be a mixture potentially of regular retail and restaurant and office or medical office on the second story. The bottom left would be retail. On the front section, the yellow section of the building, the one-story building, and with office and medical on the first and second floors. The top right would be all office on the first and second floor, and the bottom right would be medical office on the first and second floor. Having the flexibility with these uses allows us to actually provide the best combination of uses to support the community. We may be able to attract a physical therapy group or a occupational therapy group, but they may be fine with any type of adjoining use, whether it's restaurant, whether it's retail, and that'd be great. Whereas maybe a medical user would be supportive of medical use throughout the building, but would not be able to go here if it were a restaurant in front. And maybe let's say we were able to get Netflix, and Netflix would love the entire building, but they won't go here if you have retail on the front part of the building. So we don't know what's going to happen in terms of who we're going to ultimately be able to attract, but the goal is to provide the best project for the community for the long haul. So we don't want to have, in our planning process, we don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction to the market saying, well, what's saleable today? What we want to do is we want to look at the long-term perspective and say what's best for the community and how can this fit into the overall character of the community itself. On the other hand, we don't want to overprescribe what the market ultimately is going to be like. So we just don't know 2 years out, 3 years out, what's going to ultimately look like. But we believe all the principally permitted uses, we believe, can actually fit very well together. So we want to accommodate today's demands while also being very respectful of and while planning for tomorrow's needs. And so that's why the combination of uses and to be able to have that flexibility would actually be able to allow us to provide a better project for the entire city, for the entire town, I apologize. So in terms of uses, those are some of the concepts, and this is some of the diagrams that we put together for that. And certainly we can answer any questions that you have regarding uses and any of the other items that you'd like to address.
Are there questions of Mr. Dare? I think you've answered the question on uses. Thank you very much. Now, now's the time for people who have submitted cards to speak. And so I'm just taking these cards as they come. We have Horst Fent. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the name correctly. You can. Okay, thank you. And I'll just remind the speakers now that you have 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes each, and we'll time you when you start.
Is it possible to have the setback?
Well, let me stop you for 1 second. Mr. Rodriguez is not in the room at the moment, and he apparently, unless Mr. Derrick, oh, here he comes. We'll ask him to do that.
Oh, I think there's a clicker right here. You can click too.
No, all I'm looking for is the setback.
Just stop me when. Is the one you want?
No. There you go. Thank you.
All right. Again, if you would just give us your full name and your address.
Okay. My full name is Horst Fent, and I own 160 Carlton Avenue, which is right adjacent from Trader Joe's. First of all, good evening. And most importantly, thank you for sending out the notice for this meeting to the occupants at Carlton Avenue. This is the first time that occurred. Thank you. In regards to the particular project, I'm the person that submitted the idea of flipping the L in the other direction. In essence, personally, to reduce the noise from the building or from the restaurant, if you put a boomerang building like that, that would avoid noise transmission onto Carlton Avenue and the residents there. Additionally, as was discussed this evening, That would allow the two-story building to be moved further back, or the setback could go further back, and it would not encroach onto onto Los Gatos Avenue, the setback. The other item, the discussion to Commissioner Jensen, this particular profile is not a single profile, the two-story building. If you turn around and look at the second sheet, the first sheet down, that is, I understand, the east elevation. Is that correct? If that is the east elevation, which is facing Carlton Avenue, that is not a single profile. It does not look like the building on the left-hand side at all. I also agree, which was suggested, no pedestrian access from Carlton Avenue, because we're right adjacent from Trader Joe's, and that is a continuous traffic jam. People driving in and out, walking in and out, parked. If you have an office building there, people are going to park along Carlton Avenue. They're going to walk into the office, and they're going to be parked there all day long. They're not going to drive into the parking lot. It's much easier that way. The big concern in regards to what we have on Carlton Avenue is the noise factor. And the best way to reduce it is, as I indicated, is to flip the building. And in a boomerang shape would be even much better.
Let me ask you to go ahead and finish up, and we'll see if we have some questions for you.
At this time, I'm okay. I have a letter that I would like to present to you that my wife wrote since she could not be here.
That's fine.
This evening.
Before you do that, let's see if we have some questions for you.
Please.
Are there questions? Commissioner Talasfor?
Clarification, when you say flip, would you just repeat that so I
Take
understand?
the microphone with you.
Yeah. Take,
This one? Is it on? Thank you. What I'm suggesting is to take this building, run it across here. This will avoid any noise transmission. Sit down.
So much for help.
Here's a light pointer. Here you go. Here's a pointer if you'd like to use that.
Sure.
First, we have to get you a picture.
I can try. This is probably going to be a while. I think what he's suggesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fent, is the single-story portion that's currently along Gateway, moving that to the interior property line. So there's a boomerang similar to the shape that he was referring to for Trader Joe's.
that's what I understand. Clarify that, thank you. And I do have another question, since you're a resident in the area, and we've been asked to consider this tonight, and that's the uses. And so here's my question, and I'll probably ask this of all the speakers. And the question is related to because of our policy LP 7.2 in the land use element, it says that mixed use is to increase residential opportunities in commercial zones. Since you are the immediate neighborhood, and I think that this should certainly serve your neighborhood as well as keep you more on your feet and out of your cars for services, what could you see in this area of development?
Well, in regards to, unless I
Give me a short answer.
Okay. Unless I have a job in that specific building, I'm not going to use it. If there's a restaurant there, yes, I would use it. However, I'm concerned about the size, because if you look at the size, the examples they have given, this particular building will take cover 45% of the property. Am I correct on that?
One thing's
0.45
excuse me, Mr.
of the
Fent.
2 acres. I'm sorry.
For reasons beyond age, we can't ask each other questions from the podium that way. So it makes sense, but you can't do it.
Well, if that's the way you feel, okay.
Thank you. I think I have your answer.
Okay. All right, are there other questions, Mr. Penn? Thank you very much. The next speaker I have, I think, is Shirley Fent.
Right.
Oh, she's the one that
Right. I have a letter. I can give that letter to you, or
hand to the clerk.
okay, great. And then there is copies for most of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker then, and again, excuse my pronunciation, Amy Despars.
Before I start my timer section, so Bud Lortz is no longer on this board, or on,
He's never been on the board.
I mean, on this
He's
section?
still on, yes, he's got, actually
On the
got
Planning
promoted,
Commission?
I believe
Okay,
is the correct.
because on the website, so where we were having people forward letters, he's getting all the letters now. So we need to change that, I guess, on your website, so that it goes to
I'm sure they do
Wendy.
need to change that, but I will also tell you that anything he would have come in for him would have been forwarded properly.
Okay, so sorry for that inconvenience, but we just went off what was on the
The
website.
occurrence the change just happened,
Okay.
relatively speaking.
Okay, well, we just decided to send everything, it was all getting sent everywhere, and then we consolidated where it was getting sent, so.
Okay, now we can.
Now
start.
I'm ready to be
Can we have
timed.
your full name and your address?
Okay. My name's Amy Despars, 267 Long Ridge Road. My street runs directly into the back of the proposed building. We live in a great neighborhood. We have a ton of kids. We appreciate that we want this ugly lot to be beautified, but we do have some strong concerns. I also have some letters here that I'll be forwarding to you from other neighbors, and want you to know that a lot of families in the Blossom Hill Manor support all of these opinions as well. We have a great network going on between the two neighborhoods. So one huge concern is the underground parking. I can see underground parking down Los Gatos Boulevard towards the highway where there aren't as many kids. Right now, the beauty of being a teacher in this community and a parent of a teenager is I get to hear a lot of interesting stories. So right now, street fights are going on in underground parking lots. That's right behind a park, right behind our house. We already have enough problems with druggies in the park. I have a 2-story house. I watch drug deals. I call the police right from my house. We have a lot of homeless people. We've had 3 arsons within 1 mile of each other. So some concerns where you can't see people. I have a hard time with the underground parking and the safety of that. So that's one issue. One question I'd like to pose to the board to think about is what happened to the Los Gatos Boulevard general plan that was years and years ago when I first bought my house 15 years ago, of making this a walkable community. And I love that we're working on it, but I get concerned, which maybe this should just be for a later date, but I look at the Rambleth building with the parking out front. You know, this is our gateway to town. This is what we want people to be driving in from Highway 85. We want to make it look beautiful. But at the same time, I think with this building, we also want it to look right and fit and be consistent. So perfect example, Trader Joe's, which is Village Square, perfect. There is a lot of, it's not up there. There is a lot of parking out there, but you can't tell because they've planted so many trees and the way it's set back and the way it's designed. You don't notice when you're driving down Los Gatos Boulevard that it's a full parking lot out in front. A couple of us were talking just now, we like the idea of turning it so that one building is, and I don't see why the 2-story building couldn't go towards back up to Trader Joe's, because when you drive down Los Gatos Boulevard, when you drive down Long Ridge Road towards the back of this building, the views of the Cupertino Mountains are blocked. And that's one simulation that was not on there. The other simulation that was not on his proposal was if you're going south on Los Gatos Boulevard and you're turning left on Gateway and you're sitting at that stoplight, you can't see where the mountains are being blocked. And there is a huge blockage of the mountains. Oh my gosh, okay, just really quick. Just I hope that you break up the mass and it's not such a huge, overwhelming block, just like I was had to do when I remodeled my house. I wasn't allowed to have it boxy, and it really wasn't boxy. So I hope that you could break up that mass. And two things to consider is I hope you ask where the garbage is going to be. That's a big concern of mine. And also, covered parking was on, when I went down to see this in the Planning Commission, talked about covered parking out front. So maybe you could think about that when you are thinking about this.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Yes, Commissioner Talasfor.
Right. I thank you for coming down and talking. It really helps all of us. Since we don't live directly in that area, it gives us much more information. So I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the previous speaker, and that's about the uses, because I know that there is a huge neighborhood back there. So what would you see as possible uses?
Some of us, we were talking when we heard you ask that question. A restaurant, a small-scale restaurant would be nice. We said no to medical because we feel like that's too many appointments coming, going. Where if it was an office, maybe upstairs, which I'm hoping there isn't going to be an upstairs, but if there was an office up there, it would most likely be someone who would be working there all day. So we just want something where there's not a lot of coming and going and traffic all day. And that's the other thing, is the traffic at that end of town is hellacious.
Okay, I think what I'm trying to get from your people that live in your neighborhood, what would keep you out of your car and coming into this area so that it becomes part of your neighborhood? Because it will be part of your neighborhood. It's an entry into that little neighborhood.
Right. Probably a restaurant, a kid-friendly restaurant, ideally. Can I look to my friends over there to tell me?
No, that's fine. If you don't have another one, that's
but,
fine.
I mean, that's what we want. We want a kid-friendly.
And
the pet store over at Trader Joe's is great. The little
And I think you're speaking retail. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, another question I had for you, and you talked about the underground parking. You see it as a real problem. If there was some kind of a security system installed, would that ease you at all?
And my concern is who follows up on all that to make sure that, the security guard is
Just
there.
asking the question. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. Lucille Weidman? Please, Weidman?
Tonight I'll go easy on them. Hi, I'm Lucille Weidman, 215 Carl Lester
Ms.
Drive.
Weidman, if you get close to that mic,
Sorry.
thank you.
215 Carl Lester Drive, Los Gatos. Just as Amy said, I'm just one block away, closer to Ace Hardware. What I'd like to say is that the project at the Boulevard requesting approval to change the zone from CH to CHPD for a two-story commercial building totaling 40,000 square feet with underground and ground-level parking totaling almost 400 spaces should be denied. The mass and density of the proposed development goes above and beyond rational consideration for the size of the existing property. A planned development zone, CHPD, has a stipulation that states it shall not consist of less than 40,000 square feet of contiguous sites area. Currently, a zone CH protects our neighborhood from high-density commercial development and puts a more reasonable height limit on commercial buildings. It is our opinion as longtime residents of Los Gatos that this commercial development does nothing to preserve and protect the area's scenic beauty. The massive building design is not suited to the site and it most definitely does nothing to contribute to the unique character, natural beauty, and openness of our surrounding neighborhood. It is obvious the proposed development will interfere with the privacy and quiet of the surrounding residential properties and diminish the view of our beautiful mountains. If the height of this project is approved, then it only stands to reason that the future development of the property across Gateway Drive will more than likely mirror the height at 1540 Los Gatos Boulevard. This will create a boxed-in feeling for the residents who live in the surrounding neighborhood. It is imperative that the height of the building be seriously considered in its relationship to surrounding development and not block the scenic vistas. It is our opinion that greater consideration must be given to the architectural elements. Modesty of design must take precedence first and foremost to encourage a compatible relationship between the existing surrounding developments and those that are being planned. The developers of the project show very little consideration to the residents. It is a known fact by Los Gatos Police Department that we are already dealing with a high rate of traffic in our neighborhood streets. We certainly do not need the additional 400 vehicles this project will generate from sunrise to sunset, especially with the residents and auto court events. The request to change the zone from CH to CHPD should and must be denied. It is incumbent upon the Planning Department, the Planning Commission, and the Town Council to remember and respect the vision of the Los Gatos Boulevard by preserving the scenic beauty for all the residents of Los Gatos. Those of us who live in the northern part of Los Gatos love and enjoy the beauty and majesty of the Santa Cruz Mountains. Over the years, we have lost a once clear and total view of the mountains because of commercial development. To allow this project to go forward as it now stands would take away our remaining view of the mountains, and this must not be allowed to happen. We all came to Los Gatos to live within the sight and beauty of the Los Gatos Hills and the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of the speaker?
Here, here.
Thank you. Oh, you have a question? Commissioner
My-
Telesfor has her
I
question.
have my question about the use. You live in the neighborhood. What would get you on your feet and out of the car? What would be resident serving to you for
Well,
your
you know, that's an
neighborhood?
interesting question, because over the many years, I have made suggestions to the town to bring in different types of retail, different types of neighborhood-friendly, children-friendly stores, and it's always been denied because it doesn't have the cachet of a Crew or a Chico's or whatever. So what's the sense of asking us? What we want has always been rejected anyway. But I voice everything that Amy has said. No consideration has been given to the rest of us who live in the neighborhood. So why ask us what retail we want now when it's always been denied in the past?
That's why I was asking. Thank you.
The next speaker would be Larry Arzi.
My name is Larry Arzi. I live in Los Gatos, and I'm here tonight to hope to keep this a small town. First of all, I'd like to compliment the staff on this less biased report than in the past, but there is still in my mind room for improvement to avoid returning to the period when staff recommended push carts and kiosks. I believe that if staff wishes to bolster this applicant's request not to follow the rules, as they have in supporting the non-conforming request for setbacks and height variations, then they need to give as much counter-argument to make a fairer decision on your part. This is actually a beautiful project. Ken did a great job, as he does on all his projects, and I disagree that he thinks his Blossom Hill project is not a successful project. I mean, we complained about it, but you know, there's never an empty parking place when I go there. It's financially a successful project. But under the constraints of his clients, I think Ken's hands were tied, and he was unable to bring you an acceptable project. My principal concern is the building placement on the lot. The report does not support the building placement outwardly, or does it? By not identifying this as an unsurmountable problem, as it should, it minimalized it. The report, to its credit, clearly identifies that the proposed development must comply with the Los Gatos Boulevard plan. The key word here is must. It must comply with the plan. It doesn't say should or could comply. It says must. Since this project does not comply, I do not see how you can approve it, as only council can override the Boulevard plan, not you. The developer is fully aware that the Boulevard plan is a sacred cow. We have made this architect adhere to the rules on his previous project on the Boulevard. We wavered very little to the placement of the buildings on the just completed project of Lark Avenue. So why would we consider the placement of the buildings as presented now, with its increased setbacks and heights at this point of date? If we have to live with an empty lot for a while longer until we get a proper development, then so be it. Because if you allow for any major bending of the rules now, you will face the consequences when the Swanson project comes up. Now is not the time to cower and give in to the pressures of development just because times are rough. The Boulevard is supposed to be primarily retail. Professional can be allowed only on the upstairs, not on the ground level. Buildings not parking lots, are on the front of the boulevard.
Thank you. Are there questions of Mr. Arzi? Thank you very much.
Retail, Joanne, retail. That was your question. You wanted to
You mentioned it in your delivery, which is why I didn't ask you. I knew it.
The next speaker, and I'm perhaps having trouble reading this, is Joseph Jimian. Thank you.
Joseph, perhaps I'll give a little different perspective. I don't live.
Let me ask you to do this. I didn't do this before, and I should. You would state your full name for our record and your address, if you don't mind.
I'm Joseph Gimignani at 15200 National Avenue, Los Gatos.
Thank you.
Perhaps I'll give a little different perspective. I don't live, adjacent to the property, and I came here today because I'm worried that what happened at the project at 15200 may happen to this project again, and that is, although I feel for the private people that live next to these projects, but the majority of the people don't live, 20 feet away from the project. And I think this project is greatly designed, and I think it's a smart idea to have the building back, so you don't get the tunnel effect when you're driving the car. And most people in town don't live right next to the project, but they're going to be actually driving or coming off of 85 or Lark Avenue, turning and stuff. And I think this will be a beautiful project and a beautiful addition to the city. I think it's great to have underground parking, and also a two-story building on a boulevard, to me, is not high density or very tall. I ask anybody that's been to any boulevards anywhere in the world, you don't even see one-story buildings. Most are 2, 3, 4, 5-story buildings in most of the countries I've been to. So I don't think this is that high density. I think it's a beautiful building, and I like the fact that it shows the clay tile. It's a timeless piece of architecture, and it's probably the most expensive roof you can put up on a building these days. The project on 15200, when it was first proposed, after Larry Cannon reviewed it and the developers proposed it, I thought it was a beautiful building. I think it still is attractive, but I think it could have been better if we just left it alone, actually. The second tower element just looks like it's missing in the front. It looks more interesting in the back of the building than it does on the boulevard, actually. And I just hope we don't ruin this. I mean, we have professional town architects and architects here that know more than I do. I'm an accountant, and I trust that, since I think he lives in town or close to town, I think he wants to do what's best for the city. And sometimes we should just let the professionals, do what they have to do. And again, 2 stories to me is, I've never been to a boulevard anywhere in the world where 2 stories is considered such atrocious. To me, it doesn't. It just seems perfect. I think in the future we're going to see 3 and 4 and 5-story proposals for pretty soon. So I'll take a 2-story now.
All right, just one second. Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. Citizen Ray.
Some thoughts for the moment. First off, I subscribe to the viewpoint of Chairman O'Donnell. The tunnel effect of this monster building on Gateway Boulevard. You drive down there to go to Carlton. I mean, the shadow of that building blocks out the sun, let alone the mountain, okay? And of course, this developer, what does he do? He calls our gorgeous mountain a hill. Did you hear that? A hill. He insults my intelligence and my integrity and my love of natural beauty. But he's a developer. It's all about the buck. It's all about self-service. Buck's in his pocket. What does he care about community values? Not a fig. Developer. Kenny Boy Rodriguez, okay? Also, nobody has mentioned the fact that the developer is the landowner, developer, is Sand Hill Development, the owner of two other parcels with the same problems or same issues, okay, right on Los Gatos Boulevard. What's to be done with the auto dealerships? And anything you do on this, or the council, you, in conjunction with the council, you do on this will reflect, of course, set a precedent on the other two huge properties. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Setbacks. I got to tell you, setbacks in the CH zone, which this is, are as follows. I think you've gotten some misinformation from a certain figure over there, okay? The setbacks in CH zones that abuts or across the street from a lot in a residential zone must comply with the following minimum yard requirements. Front yard, 25 feet. 25 feet. Okay? Side and street, 15 feet. Rear, 20 foot. All right? Plus 1 foot for each foot a building exceeds 20 foot in height. That's the law under the CH zone, okay? Which this PUD would destroy, of course, and that's the purpose of a PUD. That's the Bud the Pud Lords. Everything he ever came up with was a PUD because that would destroy all the setbacks.
Thank you, Citizen Ray.
What? It's got 2 seconds left.
Oh, you just used them. Thank you.
Well, excuse me.
Through. You are through, Citizen Ray. Your time is up.
There's the lawyer talking, the real estate lawyer.
No, that's true.
Yeah, it's true. Thank you.
Okay, that's the only cards we have, so I'm going to invite the applicant back up.
Here's another
wait,
one right
wait,
here.
there's one more card. Is Mr. Desjarkas?
Good evening, Jeff Desjardins, 253 Long Ridge Road.
Thank you.
I'm a brand new resident of Los Gatos and of Long Ridge Road. And a couple of weeks ago, after a storm, I came out to the road, looked down Long Ridge Road in the direction of this project, and could see the mountains, and there was snow on top of them. And I thought that was really cool. Today, when I look down Long Ridge Road, I see the story poles, and they cover entirely the view of that mountain. So that's just my short anecdote. I would urge the commission to consider the need for a second story or the placement of it. With all due respect to the photo simulations, there was not one from Long Ridge Road, and I have a bunch of neighbors here. So I just urge the commission to consider that. So thank you for your time. And to address the commissioner's question, 2 things, bicycle racks and a donut shop.
1 second. Let's see if there are any other questions. Are there questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one more card coming, I believe. Mr. Novikov?
Yes, I'm so sorry. My English not so good.
That's all right. Now, let me help you by saying, if you would give us your full name and your address, and then tell us what you'd like to tell us.
Vadim Novikov, 212 Carlton Avenue, California, Los Gatos. And I agree with people who see it in the left side, 2 and around, 2-story, 2-level building. It's kill Los Gatos charm. Because when I wake up, I see sunshine and sunrise, yeah, but 2-level, it's too big, yeah. It's not downtown San Jose, not Los Angeles. Single, perfect. And, and long. Thank you, just what I want to say. That's it. Beautiful building is good. But 2-story, it's too high.
All right.
Sorry. Thank
Just
you.
1 second, let's see if there are any questions. Does anyone have a question?
Well,
We
now,
have a question.
can you answer my question about, thank you. Can you answer my question about a use for this area?
Yes, I'm thinking about that. No perfect for crime. For example, Petka, no good for crime. Trader Joe, no good for crime. Just my answer. Yeah. Something, but I need to think more about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All right, I think that is the end of the speaker cards. So I would invite Mr. Rodriguez back up. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to go through some answers here of some of the speakers. There was a question on is this the east elevation? Oops. Yes, it is. I just thought I'd put the bigger one up here. There we go. East elevation along Carlton, so that someone could see that. And I also wanted to point out that this is similar to the project next door where we have a one-story sloping roof. We have recessed windows that would be located back in terms of creating some shade and shadow along Carlton. Then a second story that would be set back with its sloped roof too. So I just wanted to point that out. There was a comment that we should probably take a view looking south on the intersection. That is, this is Gateway. This is south, looking south along Los Gatos Boulevard. There are the hills, and here you can see them as they exist today. And the one patch that can't be seen from this view is right there. Likewise, when you look up at the corner intersection, which is Gateway coming across, it's not Gateway there. I forget the name of the street as it goes this way. Plus the gas here was $4.73 a gallon. Just wanted to point that out in case anyone cared. This is the hillside, and again, you can see that exact same point. The reason we did these photo simulations is I'm more concerned about the views to the hillside as anyone who spoke, and I think you know that from our previous project. So next is what would the security be like for the underground parking? There would be full-time security, both either by the property owner and or by the office tenant. If it was all retail, that would be by the property owner. There would be full security cameras, a locked gate, and there would be little chance for someone getting down there who doesn't have card key access to it. The good thing about it is it's parking for the office, which will be in the daytime. It'll be locked at night. The office isn't open. In terms of bike racks, yes, we have bike racks, and I like the donut shop used too. And then building placement, I would not feel overly comfortable by flipping the building. I think what that does is it creates an issue here. As you're coming down Los Gatos Boulevard, it's going to block the majority of the views to the foothills located in this direction, which if you've ever come down Los Gatos Boulevard south, that is the impact. And so I think, again, if you look at that photo simulation we have here where you can see across the top of this, you see the foothills behind. So with that, I close my presentation and answer any questions that the Commission might have.
Are there questions? Commissioner Sayoc.
Going back to your last comment about flipping the one story so
Yes.
that it's adjacent. So in your opinion, a one story would still block the views as you're driving down Los Gatos Boulevard?
Let me just go back and show you the sim so that you could see it yourself. Okay, I don't want to, there's the one story. So what would happen is that this part of the building, if it was one story, would be located back here. And again, as you're walking along the boulevard, biking along the boulevard, you're going to look up and that's going to be blocked. And I think that is this is a major mountain location here, Hillside, that I think we have to protect. And you said that last time when I was here in May. So some of the other residents suggested maybe that should be the two-story part. You know, I think conceptually we studied that and we looked at that. But again, if you could imagine putting a two-story up here, it would completely block the hillside. So we have looked at a lot of these different building placements. We think that this is the most successful for all the reasons I stated earlier tonight.
Ms. Seg, did you have any follow-up on that? Okay, Commissioner Telesfor?
I have a follow-up to that. Mr. Rodriguez, when I've noticed, though, in other shopping area,
Yes.
centers like
Yes.
this, that when buildings are placed back off of main streets, that the mountains seem to be more highlighted. It seems like I can see more of them.
When they're
So it
placed
seems
back,
to me, yes.
when they're placed
right.
back, yes.
That one story. So it seems to me that it really wouldn't impede the view of the hills as much as it might with it being closer to streets.
Well,
And I would cite Cornerstone.
Let me understand, is there a question here?
The question is, isn't there a perspective that needs to be addressed with this?
I think it's a great question, yeah, and you and I have debated, we've all debated this, okay? Take the pad building at Cornerstone, the Morgan Stanley building. That is approximately the same height as this building. And this particular section, walking along Los Gatos Boulevard, it'll be shorter in terms of its elevation and length. So it'll be less impactive. And I think that would be a good example, is to walk out there and you'll get a similar feel there. You still have views of the hills.
Is he answering your question? Because I didn't understand your question.
My
You're asking
question was,
if you were to
is it-
flip it.
Yes, if he was to flip it, the perspective
Oh,
would,
to here.
yes, if you were to flip the building like's been suggested, with the one story along the adjacent parking lot, isn't it true that a perspective like that, when you're standing or on the boulevard in a car, as you're driving toward it, you would have a view of the hills? It wouldn't impede that view of the hills. Isn't that true?
Wherever you place this building, if it's on this corner or this corner, anyone walking along Los Gatos Boulevard will get the same feel.
Okay.
All I can do is let me go back to the photo sims, and I mean, that's probably the best example there. You can see this building through these trees, which used to be the old DeMartini Produce building, and anyone walking along there, it blocks that view. So my point is that whether it's on the corner or inboard, I think you have to debate which one is more powerful and which one's more important. That's why I think where it's located on Gateway is the better location. And, this is very consistent with the Los Gatos Boulevard plan, very consistent. The council just reaffirmed that in their meeting. While I missed that meeting, I watched the live, streaming video for 3 hours and went through exactly what they said, that some buildings should be placed up on the street where they don't affect the views of the hills, and others should be placed back. And they specifically cited the Cornerstone project. So that's exactly what we've done again. And I want to say that it's very consistent with the direction that the council gave for the Los Gatos Boulevard guidelines, reaffirming them.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Erickson?
I'd like to ask your opinion about an issue that I'm trying to understand this particular PD in the context, in a larger context, and both the context of the entire development of the boulevard as we will undoubtedly see it evolve over time.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know how to address this. How one addresses this in an individual PD, because we tend to get a request for a PD, this one, and then at some later moment we get one for another one.
Yes.
And it's likely on this side of the boulevard between Los Gatos Almaden Road and Gateway that we will get at least one other one, if not two other ones, on significant pieces of property in the reasonably near future.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to understand is how we avoid developing each of those as individual projects and lose sight of how one might think about the development of the east side of the boulevard in a larger context. So I want to ask you a question about what your thinking is about that, given your interest, both your personal interest as a resident, as I understand it, and your professional interest and your experience in helping to develop the boulevard.
Yes. I'll try my best to answer that. I think one of the things that really helped a planner like myself is the council, this commission speaking to the council and them doing joint discussions about the guidelines, the Los Gatos Boulevard guidelines, and reaffirming those guidelines just recently. I think that was a huge help. I think by also stating that not every building has to be up on the street. While I do agree that 15200, one of the, I believe that you spoke about, it's a one-story building, pushing it up to the street worked there because of the residents were so close to it at the back. I think that's a good example of a lower one-story building that can work when it's up to the street. I also think that other buildings on the east side will work fine in terms of a combination 1- and 2-story. If you look at Carlton and the length of it, let me go back to that slide. As you get down, some of these buildings, of course, are 2-story, and as you get down Carlton, they're 2-story there. They're 2-story apartments. They're nearly 30 feet tall, or in some cases they exceed that. So the scale is very appropriate. And so there, I think, on the east side of the boulevard, when you try to place a 2-story building up onto the street, or even a taller 1-story, I think you run the risk of blocking the most important view, to me, which is the southeastern foothills. If you look at the way that the foothills wrap around Los Gatos, they really start as an easterly piece and wrap around to the sort of, not westerly, but southwesterly, okay? So the west side of Los Gatos Boulevard has less of a foothill problem to deal with than the east side. And I do agree with Commissioner Telesfor that some buildings, I think, can come up, and the placement to me along the east side is incredibly important, because those are going to be the ones that block that powerful view. And I can only say to you, in my opinion, when I look at what I did at Cornerstone versus what I did at 15200, not what versus those buildings, I wouldn't want to do a very big building that's up on the street. I don't think it's pedestrian friendly. I don't even think it's automobile friendly. Now that goes against the new wave of planning, okay? But I've been living with this new wave of planning since 1985. I don't necessarily agree with it. And I think that you all have a tough task. And I think I have a tough task too. That's why I'm trying to spend so much time in terms of doing photo simulations, coming here, looking at different site layouts, being flexible. There's a question about the PD. I don't want to do a PD on this site. I would never do a PD in Los Gatos. I have to do a PD on this site. This is an automobile dealership site. It must be a PD. Not that I'm trying to ask for anything. If the setback doesn't work, I gave you options. Let's lower the building. I'm in compliance. I'll make the setback work. And you'll get the extra landscaping. You'll get all those things that I think are very important. But I just wanted to say that I think the PD is good because you all get to take a really close look at it, as does the council.
Yes, Commissioner Erickson?
So would you, in terms of thinking about the long term, so we force all of the pedestrian interaction between the large pieces of property to the street, as opposed to creating designs that would promote pedestrian interaction between the pieces of property. So I have to, if I leave this piece of property, I have to walk out, if I'm a pedestrian, I have to walk out to the boulevard and then back in, as opposed to providing for what I might consider interior pedestrian circulation between the pieces of property.
That's a great question. That's a planner question. I'd like to do both. And I think, as a commission, I think you should look at both. Let me say why I believe that. I think that there's going to be people that are walking along the boulevard that are just going to be walking and strolling along the boulevard and riding bikes and having, walking with kids and doing all that won't come in and shop the retail pedestrian way, which is really here. On the other hand, I think that every site should be linked in here too. I think that shoppers who park here ought to be able to walk over to here. I think shoppers that park over here ought to be able to walk here. That to me is the right way to go. Now, I would love to have that as a condition of approval, and I would hope that the property owner next door would want that too. I think it benefits both pieces. So that's what I would try to do.
Yes, you want to follow up?
So let me ask you let me share with you what was behind my question about removing the center parking. I understand the other issue that you talked about, but it seems like to me that one of the tricks long term about making the development of the boulevard work is that it isn't isolated from the residential areas that are adjacent to it on either side of the boulevard. Mm-hmm. And so more green space, more green space that people can gather in, mm-hmm. in the ways that we develop the boulevard might promote and invite people from the neighborhood to own the space, experience the space, if you would, mini parks inside of the commercial developments. And so I guess part of it, much as the way shopping malls, and this isn't a shopping mall, right, have evolved over time to create spaces for people to gather where they interact between the retail places. Both of these, the two pieces of property together next to each other, don't seem to me to be very pedestrian friendly. They presume that people come to the site in their car, park their car, and use the site, and then leave that site. Okay. So they don't promote interaction between. They don't invite people who are in the residential areas adjacent to it to come to the area, have a donut or have a ice cream, whatever it is, and to stay in the area and experience the area as part of their neighborhood.
Yes.
So that seems to me to be a challenge that we will face, because if we pursue what this gives me the feel of, we will develop commercial properties along the boulevard that will presume that people will drive their cars and enter from the boulevard. And so I guess given all that presumption, because Chair O'Donnell will cut me off in a minute and ask me if I'm asking you a question, is
I have an answer for you.
React to that proposition given your experience and your concern for the community.
Yes, okay. I think that this one starts to do many of the things that you're asking for, and let me kind of take you through how that would work. One, I know you're familiar with the Viva restaurant, but the outdoor seating out there, I wish I would have had more seating there, because I think that is a very pleasant space, April through October. It's got the right sun exposure. It could be deeper. It would create more outdoor seating, more sort of neighborhood orientation and gathering spot. So what we did here is we doubled the space of all of the depth here, as well as created about 4 times more. So that this, if it is a restaurant or a combination of restaurants or food service or a donut shop or whatever it is, all has outdoor seating. And it all has it with the correct sun exposure here. The other thing it does is it takes this walkway, which we connected to the boulevard, and takes you right through the project. So that's a win-win there. I think that's the right way to do it. Now, that's why I said earlier, your idea of connecting these would be perfect. That's the way it should be. Now I can walk from here across this parking lot and here. On the other hand, I'm sympathetic to the residents who live back here. This project's underparked. They park along Carlton. So they walk through here and they invade the neighborhood. I understand that. That's a problem. I don't want to create another problem like that. So I think we have to be careful of how we do that. I think we want the neighborhood to walk in here, but we don't necessarily want the autos abusing and using, invading that space from a safety standpoint, from a vehicular standpoint, traffic. So if this is auto-oriented out here and focuses to Los Gatos Boulevard, that won't hurt the neighborhood. If it's not underparked, which I think is a key. Remember, I said that earlier. Then there won't be poaching out here in the neighborhood. There's no reason you would park your car here, walk completely around here and here to get into this building. You would never do it. I mean, you'd drive away. Look at how far it is. What you'll do is you'll pull in here and then you'll pull underground. That's what I think you want them to do. Part of the reason is that this Trader Joe's is a high, generator of people. I mean, it's a high parking requirement. It's abusing, it's neighborhood friendliness there. Yet on the other hand, if I was a neighbor, I'd want to go in and walk right in and use the center. So I like your idea of this connection and then this connection that does that. And look, this comes out right here, right at the intersection. I think that movement is fantastic. You would have no issues pedestrian-wise and no conflicts with a car other than right here. And somehow there could be a nice walk that's done there that, would work.
Let me try to bring this to somewhat of a close. Do you have a follow-up question? Does anyone else have any questions? Commissioner Telesfor.
Teeny question, and it was when you were addressing the underground parking security.
Yes.
I believe you said that parking would be, am I to infer from what you said that parking is to be limited to the office-only people?
In the daytime, it would be available to anyone because the gate would be up.
Okay.
That way, if the lot was ever full here, from a retail standpoint, you would come park underneath here. Okay? At nighttime, this gate would be completely secured. The entire underground parking would be secured and only used by card key via an office person who might be there after hours.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. First of all, I really appreciate what you're trying to do. I see the logic, and I see how you systematically really tried to address our concerns from the study session. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I do want to kind of revisit the size of the building. I want to make sure I understand. From what I understand, I want to correct me if I'm wrong, is that you need a certain size of building to make back the cost of putting in underground parking.
That's part of it, yes.
That's part of it. Is there a tipping point? And this is going somewhere. But is that 40? Are we at the tipping point, or?
It's a great question. I'll tell you. Yeah, you're not going to see two-story buildings with underground parking that are typically less than about 0.40 FAR. And so this is 0.5 FAR. That's the FAR, but the coverage is actually 29%. So it's got a low coverage because all the additional landscaping, which obviously costs more money, but it does have that threshold of 0.40 to 0.45. It's right there. I mean, I would challenge you to look at any other community, and costs are costs in Santa Clara County. It's not more expensive in San Jose to build it than it is in Los Gatos. It's the same contractor.
So where I'm going with this, and I was one of the commissioners that really felt that there should be an element pushed forward on Los Gatos Boulevard in the study session, pedestrian-oriented element.
Yes.
But hearing the residents' concern and listening to the discussion tonight, if I think about this boomerang design, and I really like Mr. Erickson's idea of connectivity, that really rings true to me.
Me too.
But just looking at it kind of as an exercise, if we were to do that on that south boundary, since it's at an angle, you have a longer distance. And then the north boundary.
Yes.
And can you make up significant square footage there and perhaps reduce the two-story element on Carlton to some extent? Is there some compromise there in gaining square footage on that longer frontage?
I don't know if you could or you couldn't until I really, penciled, sat down and sketched it and made sure that, the setbacks were all right, and we looked at that. The only thing I would ask you, because I do like Commissioner Erickson's comment that by putting a building here, it walls off this connection. And that's the only thing. We tried to pull them together, and I know, I really appreciate you seeing the method to my madness, that this U-shape, one of the residents said we really like this landscaping. We don't see these cars. You won't see these cars. This is more heavily landscaped than this. So if you like this, you're going to love that. And I think that ultimately, in the end, will be the right way, this U-shape. It will be. So
the bottom line, though, is when you were looking at alternatives, you didn't really pencil out
I did not study that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So
All right.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Other questions? There being none, we'll close the public hearing.
Thank you very much.
The public hearing is closed, and I would now invite and I'm sure there should be lots of comments from the commissioners as we try to get towards a motion. So if we want to start, we can work down one side or the other, and I think we started at this end the last time, and maybe I'll start with Commissioner Eriks. If you would help us try to think this thing through.
Here we go. So I would offer about 3 or 4 comments. One of them I won't repeat. I suggested when Ms. Rodriguez was up. It seems to me I'm trying to understand how we develop each side of the boulevard as a whole, and we don't tend to do it as individual parcels of property. And
Can I just say one thing, and we've got the attorney here, and he perhaps could help us on that, but my understanding is you could impose a condition on this development, but that doesn't mean they can get on the next person's property, because that requires an easement and that requires the consent of the other property. If we were developing both properties at the same time, we could do that, which is not to say we shouldn't encourage and maybe make a condition encouraging them to attempt to do that, but we can't impose a condition they do that. Is that correct? I sure hope so.
Yeah, I think in large part that's very accurate. The last thing that Chair O'Donnell said is that encouraging it puts the town at a lot less obligation than requiring it. Because if you require it as a condition of approval, you may trigger powers of the town that you don't want to activate as far as taking land.
Well, we wouldn't impose it on the town. We'd impose it on the applicant who couldn't do it.
And then as such, they may have rights against the town for you imposing a condition that they can't do. So recommendation doesn't have that same level of, it doesn't have that issue.
But in any event, go ahead. I just
Right. Yeah. No. And I think I appreciate that, and I understand that. But essentially, what this design has done is created a wall between the two properties that prevents any interaction between them. So there could be other ways to accomplish it without encroaching upon the property owners. But that's another question. So I guess I would continue to have a concern about how we view individual developments in the context of the whole, with the constraints that we have. I guess I didn't hear them say that there would be any significant either design or function consequence to the design or the function by choosing option B over option A. So it seemed to me in either design or function, they're not compromising anything of any significance in terms of what they said. So it seemed like to me option B somewhat addresses some of those problems. I guess I'm concerned and actually have a question for staff, if that's okay. So in the parking study, did we take into account any? I didn't see it in the parking study. We take into account the impact, what the current traffic loads are and activity is on Carlton Avenue, and what that current situation is, and what this would either add to either a good situation or a bad situation.
I think that's a good question for the gentleman from TJKM who is a traffic consultant.
1 second. We have a closed public hearing. Is that,
He's with staff, correct.
Fine. Then I think we can direct your question to someone who perhaps knows the answer. And if you would identify yourself and try to answer the question. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Rich Hager, TJKM Transportation Consultants. We are the on-call traffic engineering consultant to the town. Yes, the traffic study did assume that a few trips would use Carlton out of the peak hour trips. The peak hour trips we assumed that would be generated by the project would total about 200 in the AM and PM peak hours, the way we analyzed it. But based on the traffic patterns in the area and the adjacent major arterials of Los Gatos Boulevard and Highway 85, State Route 17, and access to the interchanges, we would project a very small percentage of the project traffic to use Carlton and the other residential streets, and that is addressed in the traffic study. It works out to about 5 or so trips, 5 or less trips, less than 5 trips in each direction on Carlton during the peak hours.
Mr. Erickson, do you have a follow-up on that?
So you didn't study the present conditions on Carlton itself as a part of your?
No, actually what we looked at is just the signalized intersections along Los Gatos Boulevard, including the Gateway intersection.
Any other questions of the traffic consultant? Commissioner Sayoc?
Actually, one of the desk items that we received today was a suggestion from the Grosvenor property, which is to the left, of putting a cut through the median.
Yes.
I'm hoping that you've seen it and that you have some comments to share with us.
Yes, I do. And if I could borrow your pointer? Okay, so what we're talking about is the project driveway here to open up this median to allow left turns into the driveway. So what that would involve is creating a new left turn lane in this area, and obviously you would lose all the landscaping in this area. Now there's two possibilities, either with or without a signal at that location. Without a signal, you're going to lose this landscaping as well for visibility purposes. Also, there's a safety concern if this is not signalized with a left turn arrow, because it's turning across 3 lanes of traffic that is 35 plus, probably emphasis on the plus, miles per hour for the opposing traffic. So that's a safety concern. So if there is a signal, the spacing is a concern with the signal, because the existing signals here are about 800 feet apart at Gateway and at the Village Square driveway. So now you've got at about 400-foot spacing another signal. And with that, you're going to have very poor signal timing and progression along Los Gatos Boulevard and increased delay.
Any other questions of the consultant? Thank you very much. And Commissioner Erickson, why don't you resume?
Thank you. One other comment. The community benefit is proposed by the developer as being doing the landscaping on the Gateway one. When I reviewed the Boulevard plan presently, the one that's in present, there are nodes at intersections along the boulevard. There isn't one called for in the present plan, or wasn't one noted at this particular intersection, not having been directly involved in that process, although having been a citizen participant. I wonder if it would be a better community benefit to develop this intersection as envisioned as a node, as described in the Boulevard plan, and I wonder if at the time the reason it wasn't seen as a potential node is because the use on this particular property was a auto dealership, as opposed to the kind of activity that's now contemplated for it, which might have been. But anyway, it's a different way to think about the community benefit.
Would you like a response from staff on that?
So as was mentioned by Mr. Rodriguez, Bud Lortz took the Boulevard plan in its current state to the council for affirmation. And what was discussed in there is a heavy emphasis on infrastructure improvements, landscaping, node improvements. So staff has added a condition, which is number 6, because there's talk of the possibility of a potential benefit assessment district for Los Gatos Boulevard to ensure those improvements. And so we've added a condition to ensure their participation in that future improvement.
Thank you. Are you finished? Thank you. Okay, so Commissioner Jensen?
I agree with much of Mr. Erickson's comments, and thank you everyone for their presentations. I thought they were very helpful. One of my issues, I guess, is that as a commission, we tend to look at these things as though they are going forward. And the language that we get is as this moves forward. And I don't think that we take enough time to say, well, we're actually here because we can decide whether it goes forward or not. And when we have little second-story additions or architecture of a single-family house, we don't hesitate to send it back for redesign. But when the bigger the project, the more hesitancy there is to send it back for redesign. And I appreciate the fact that it's changed from the study session, but personally, I still think it's too massive for the site. I think it doesn't comply with the Los Gatos Boulevard plan with respect to the hillside views or the commercial design guidelines, which specifically indicate that the views to the surrounding hills should be maintained.
Commissioner Jensen, if you could.
I'm sorry, I can't talk. The views to the hillside should be maintained under the commercial design guidelines. I don't think that's necessarily happening here. And I can't speak into the microphone and read at the same time. So, in the conclusion and staff recommendation, one of the points is that the impact in the views of the hillside has been reduced. And I think reduced goes from the original negotiating position of the developer, and I don't think reduction fits with the guidelines of either the boulevard or the design. And we shouldn't say, well, you originally proposed 60 feet and now it's at 40, so that's good. I think we have to say, well, what is it we're really looking for? We spend a lot of time developing these plans and guidelines, and we should actually try to follow them as opposed to assuming that something's going to go forward. Participating in the original Los Gatos Boulevard charrette, the nodes were at major intersections, and that's why it's not. So there's one at Lark, there's one at Blossom Hill, there's one, so that's why it was done that way. And since there's one at Lark, it doesn't necessarily make sense to do it here. I don't think taking ivy out of a median and putting nicer landscaping on is a community benefit that would justify this massive a building. I appreciate what the developer is trying to do, but I do think that we're able to ask for something better, and it's okay for us to do that. So I couldn't support a recommendation as presented going forward.
Commissioner Sayoc?
Okay. So first off, I do want to thank the applicant. As the other commissioners have said, what was presented to us last year during the study session, for the most part, a lot of the guidance that we provided was met. Bring it down in scale, try and bring it down in size. Some stories were one story. The bottom line is, a lot of development is going to be happening along Los Gatos Boulevard, and we have to reconcile what will be attractive to those driving on Los Gatos Boulevard, but what is also livable for the neighborhoods behind us. It's one thing to be driving down in your automobile, but it's another thing to actually be living in that neighborhood and having to look at this enormous project, what some perceive to be, on a daily basis. And so that's the dilemma and the balance that I'm trying to reconcile, is how do you make it livable, and what kind of compromises can we bring together? And nature of compromise, some people aren't always happy. Some of the things, first off, in terms of placement, I'm really intrigued with the idea of flipping the orientation so that the L is adjacent to the Village Square development. I do think because it's longer, you might be able to bring more square footage and possibly reduce the two-story element that's on Carlton Avenue. I'm very concerned with the tunnel effect that'll provide for the neighborhood behind it, and so definitely a reduced setback that is being asked is something I wouldn't support. Hopefully, with the good design, and I'm very confident in Mr. Rodriguez's designs, is you can kind of, I guess, see if you can balance out so that that two-story element is less obtrusive to the neighborhood, because it's a beautiful design, but it's still a two-story wall. And what we're looking for is a transition to the neighborhood, not necessarily a barrier from commercial to the residential. I like the connectivity that Commissioner Erickson had said, and some architectural elements like arcades and walkways that you have suggested in past projects. Maybe those are things that could be incorporated in this design. Another thing that I think is valuable with the Village Square development that makes it seem less obtrusive is it does seem residential in nature. And if it means changing the the material on the roof so that it's more harmonious with the existing residential neighborhood. Maybe those are some things that I'd like to see when it comes back for us. And so again, I mentioned setbacks. I'm definitely not in favor of reduced setbacks. The higher the project, I think if you have a setback, it provides a little bit more of a buffer. I'm definitely against option A, anything that goes above 35 feet. I'm already nervous with reaching 35 feet, so having anything above it that is a deal killer for me. Community benefit, we've heard a lot of discussion about traffic on the Carlton side of it. And I understand that no traffic studies were currently done, and maybe that is something that the community behind you would more appreciate rather than landscaping. And that's more of a public and safety issue, and I think that's something that would be more of a community benefit than, you know, not to say I don't like pretty flowers, but to me, if I were in that neighborhood, I'd rather have safety versus the visual aesthetics of a nice median. And definitely would like, there was also the safety consideration. I appreciate that there's going to be a gate there for the underground parking. I'd like to make sure that all the safety elements are there, not only for vehicular, but pedestrian, because I know there's a lot of concern there for people, homeless people, if there's any way they can walk down there, especially in the winter. That's something that I want to see addressed, whether it's through the applicant or through the town, through our police review. So I think those are my major comments, and I'll pass it on to my next commissioner.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I have a few, I appreciate everything that's been said, so I'm not going to repeat what I've heard, but I'm in agreement with most of it, and a lot of it was things I would have said. Anyway, I thought it was good that what the applicant recognized was that this building serves as a transition from commercial uses to the residential neighborhood, and that it acts as a sound and a visual barrier. However, I think what's happened here is that we've missed a little bit of that neighborhood and the feelings of the neighborhood. And I would hope that we would pay a little bit more attention to design that diminishes the appearance of a long horizontal tile roof. And also, for me, it's the corner of Carlton and Gateway that is so massive. When you're coming north from Carlton or south from Carlton, you see this heavy weighted corner. And so that's why I'm intrigued, as I was during the study session when I brought up about flipping that building and making it more of an L. And hearing comments tonight, I'm even more intrigued with trying to use that L as flipping it, okay, so that you can extend perhaps hopefully the retail, thereby reducing some of that second story or that two-story element. I mean, I have no idea how you do this. You're the designer. But I think that is really a good idea. I would be sorry to lose the transition, if it was even possible, to the adjacent shopping area. However, maybe using arcades, but of course you'd have to be talking to the adjacent property owner. I mean, it'd be a wonderful idea. I don't know if it can be done. Let's see, what else did I want to mention? So mass and scale is still a concern to me. I'd like to mention uses, because that was a concern to me as well. I have no idea what the balance, we have to be careful when we make decisions for rezoning about the balance of what the use will be for. So if it goes from something that's tax revenue generating to medical office and office, we will lose a lot of what we need. And not only in money, but also in places for people to be and for services for that area. So I would like hearing the neighbors tonight. What they wanted was retail that was local to them. I mean, it's just almost a privilege or a dream sometimes to be able to just walk out of your door to a shopping area and take care of a lot of things. So I think that that's what we should really think about. No, we can't predict the future of what's to be, but we can only look at what we have now in front of us, and that's the needs that we have for our neighbors. I think that would be a good need there. It would keep them out of their cars and on their feet. Let's see, what else did I want to say? The PD isn't supposed to give us extreme privilege. You know, we have reasons for a PD. It's not to exceed in any way that doesn't benefit our town. And I do think speaking of community benefit, we do need to look at more carefully. I think if you went over the policies in our land use elements, the policies in our community design elements, there's so many we're not meeting. I couldn't possibly okay this project to go forward. I would like to see this redesigned.
Yes, Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you. I think you're starting to see some consensus among the commission. I won't be redundant, but I echo a lot of the sentiments already expressed. If I get a clarification from staff, though, on the contribution to the benefit assessment district, would that be in addition to the improvements to Gateway for the community benefit?
Yes. Basically, with the community benefit assessment district, each property will be allocated a certain improvement number that they need.
So it would be that
meet.
contribution plus what they're recommending for
Correct.
the Gateway improvement. All right. I'm not as opposed to that as a community benefit. I think that actually would probably, the combination of the two, I think would probably satisfy me, but I do like the idea of some sort of traffic calming on Carlton if something that could help alleviate the neighbors' concerns would also be a good option. The uses, I too would be concerned about a project that would be all office use. I really would like to see a significant neighborhood serving retail component to the use here. But one big issue for me that I don't think has been addressed too much is the views of the hillsides. I mean, to approve this project, we need to find that it's consistent with the Los Gatos Boulevard plan, and that's a biggie for me. And I do appreciate there are certain vantage points where this project very nicely frames the hillsides, and that is sitting at that signalized light, looking south and pulling out from Rotten Robbie's, the hillsides, and even walking along Los Gatos Boulevard. The hillsides are framed nicely, but there's a lot of other perspectives where the hillsides are completely blocked out. And that's driving south on Los Gatos Boulevard from further down, the whole hillside's gone. Looking toward the Hamilton Range from the Trader Joe's parking lot is completely blocked out. And also driving, south on Carlton, the Cupertino portion of the hills are blocked out. So I do think that's where I start to get concerned about the mass of this building and that second story element. And so I too would probably support a redesign.
Thank you. I perhaps am concerned that if we're going to send it back, we're supposed to send it back with specific directions, and very frankly, I don't think we've done that. We've had very general, I don't like this, and I don't know if you could do that, but you is, I don't really like it, and why don't you do something else? That's not what we're supposed to do. If we don't like it, I think we ought to recommend denial, because I have to tell you that these issues are perhaps bigger than this commission can take care of, because they go to the heart of the matter. You can do a strip mall or strip zoning down that street, and it'll all be one story, and everybody will be unhappy. If you can't put a two-story building on this property, then I don't know what you're going to do, because if you put one-story buildings with all surface parking, it's going to look like El Camino Real did some years ago. We won't be proud of that. On the other hand, I'm very concerned with the tunnel effect in the back, but I am not the one that can redesign this building. And I don't think we can redesign that tonight. So I've heard nothing that would be fair to anybody to say, send it back and come on back sometime later and get us another shot at it. We had a good meeting first. They've been very responsive to that. I'm sympathetic to saying the bulk and mass is too great, but I'm very concerned about where that leads. And if I had to choose between this project and something that it is replacing, which is basically single-story, although God knows that the McHugh building at that end was not an attractive building, I'd go for the two stories. I don't want to see a bunch of one-story buildings going down that boulevard with nothing but asphalt around them. And we can sit here and do all the planning we want to, but when it doesn't pencil out, it isn't going to happen. So where that leads me is it's clear that we do not have the votes to recommend approval of this. We could send it back. I would oppose that. So I guess all I'm saying is if the commission wants to deny it or recommend denial, I think we should. Because I think this is a very critical issue of how the town sees its future. And if the town sees its future as single-story buildings going down the boulevard, so be it. Hopefully they'll come up with some way to do it that is attractive. I'm not sure how they'll do that, but that the elected officials ought to do. But I don't think simply telling this applicant to go back and draft something else and not telling him what it would take to get us to approve it. I don't know. I've listened to all of you, and I don't know what it would take to get 4 votes, or for that matter, probably 2. So that's my only suggestion. My suggestion is not that we approve this. My suggestion is that, in fact, the majority can move to recommend denial, and we can let the council tell us how they perceive this, because it is true. They did just say that the plan for the boulevard is what they're behind. I'm not sure that answers the question we have before us, and I'd like to get some answers, and I don't think we're the ones who can give those answers. So that's my thought.
Do you want us to comment anymore?
Sure.
Okay.
We have Commissioner Jensen first.
I'd like to follow the chair's suggestion then and move for denial, or move to recommend denial of the project as we have it before us now. And that is because I do not believe that we can make the required findings, including that there's a community benefit, that the zone change is consistent with the general plan, the Los Gatos Boulevard plan, or the commercial design guidelines, for all the reasons that have been stated in comments given by commissioners.
Is there a second? I'll second. We have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion? No discussion? Commissioner Callisworth?
Yeah, I really hate to deny. I mean, I think we're somewhat near. I don't think I said anything about not wanting a 2-story building, ever.
I didn't understand what you said.
Okay. Well, I didn't say anything about not wanting a 2-story building. I think I was clear. But I did say that when you are a transition building, that we just need to pay attention to height on this one. That's what I was saying, or what I meant.
What does that mean?
That means that I think it needs to come down in height.
So it isn't 2 stories?
Yes, it can be 2 stories. It just 35 to me. I thought the apartments behind it, if I'm not, am I correct? Are they at what, 22 feet?
I'm not sure what the apartments are behind it.
Okay, 22 or 30 or something.
The
but
zone
something,
allows 35.
So just something, and I thought that if the L was flipped, then the 2-story maybe could be, could come down a little bit or be put a little bit more on the land. I don't know. I was just trying to work with this. I think we've come a long way. It just seems to me from where we started and where we are now, we're still hearing the same thing. So maybe you're right. Maybe we don't know. We need more direction from someone else.
Just wanted to respond a little bit to Commissioner Talsfor, and I think that what Chair O'Donnell was saying was that the direction would come from the town council, because these are policy questions, and I think Chair O'Donnell is right that we don't make the redesign here. It will be considered in front of town council, and it's up to the applicant whether they incorporate any comments in what they bring to town council. So that's why it may be beneficial actually to everyone to get it in front of the actual policy-making body.
I guess I would be in support of a redesign. I think that the discussion today focused one other option, and that was flipping it so that the 1-story L would be on the south side. And the applicant was quite honest when he said he didn't consider that, and we don't know what that would look like, and whether or not he could add more square footage by having that longer length. And so I think it's come to us once in a study session, which was an informal discussion, which I found very, very helpful, and I hope the applicant did too. But this is the first Planning Commission meeting that this has been brought to. And we've had several projects that have come many times, not to say that that ought to be the norm, but I do think that, you know, I think there are some options yet. We haven't exhausted yet, and I'd like to see what another option alternative would be if we flipped it around. And if it seems like there still is no agreement on what that should look like, then certainly the policymakers should be making that decision. But I don't feel that I've exhausted all the options yet. And certainly with the two-story, I think what I had said was that there are architectural elements that can help break down a two-story building so that it doesn't look like one big wall, a 35-foot wall. We've seen it with residential houses. We've seen it with the Village Square, where it does look a little bit more residential in nature because of the roof, because of the balconies. Suggestions like that, certainly I'm not designing it, but those are things that I think an architect can bring forward that could provide another design for us to look at and say, hey, maybe this is more in keeping of what I was looking at. So
in other words, I understand that we should give them a specific recommendation as opposed to say, go try something else.
yes, that was my.
So we would have to find out that, assuming for the moment this motion would fail, if the majority of the commission would say, what we want you to do is go back instead of flipping it, among other things, but that would be a specific recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. So any other comments on this? Commissioner Bourgeois?
If I remember correctly, in listening to the when the town council reaffirmed the goals and policies of the Boulevard Plan, I thought I heard them say pretty clearly that not all parcels are created equal, and the view sheds are going to be different for different. The level of significance will be different at different intersections and for different parcels and from different vantage points, and I guess that's where I'm struggling here is, and maybe denying it and getting that input from council would be the way to go to see how they interpret that. Because I really don't want to punt the decision to council. I with Commissioner Sayak, I think we're pretty close, and I'd like to see us get something that we're proud to send to council. And I think we're close, but yeah. So I'm on the fence with this motion.
Let me just say again. I can tell you, I'm very troubled by what it seems to me is a collision of goals, and that isn't what we have done. We're trying to interpret what we've been told we ought to do. And if you look at the Boulevard and think of the pieces that will be developing, and I certainly agree with Commissioner Erickson, we're not making this decision in a vacuum. But what we do here will be important because the next person comes in and says, well, wait a minute, you did this here. So all I'm saying is when I look at that area and I realize the size of those things, and of course they change shape, people say, well, I'm not against a two-story, I just don't want it to be two-story height. The only evidence we've got in the record is they can't make it smaller. So we say, well, make it smaller. There's no evidence in the record to support that. We say, well, we don't like a lot of asphalt, so the underground parking is really good. What's the evidence? The evidence is the flipping point is at 40,000 square feet. Well, do something else. I think the $64 question is, are we prepared to go with single-story buildings and buy the consequences? The answer may be yes. And that's fine. That to me is such a citywide question and such a vital question for the development of this whole thing. Because the sooner we get the council that makes these things to say, yeah, well, that's what we meant, and that's what we're prepared to live with. Because I think, I'd sure like to know if that's what we're prepared to live with. So anyway, whatever we decide to do, that's the only reason I'm pushing it. I'm not pushing it. I wish we could say, tell you what, if you did this, this, and this, we think you might have a good project. If you said, for example, I want a single-story building, get rid of the underground parking, for all the parking service. Now, the other thing is on uses, the uses are the uses permitted in the zone. You don't get to say, well, but you only get to do retail. So that's an interesting question, but we have no power over that. So we, at the moment, as near as I can tell, we have two people, the maker and the second, who are in favor of the motion. If we don't, if everybody else is not, then we'll have a second. So are there more are there more comments on the motion? If they're not, let's go ahead and call the question. And all those in favor of the motion say, raise your hands. So we have 3 in favor, which assumes we have 3 opposed, so the motion fails. So now we're right for a second motion. There's only one.
Is it possible for us to take a 10 or 10-minute break or something to kind of collect our thoughts?
Let's take about 5 minutes. Okay, so it's 5 minutes to 10 now. Let's break it. Let me say this. I summarized something a moment ago, and I was just told that I'd forgotten to turn my mic on. I will not attempt to re-summarize it other than to say that the motion before us, I believe, is an attempt to get guidance from the city council, the town council, on a very critical issue, and that is how do they perceive the development of the boulevard, not just this site, in the future. Will it be limited in height, so it's either 1 story or awfully short 2 stories? I don't know how exactly you do the awful short 2 stories. I think these are all valid questions, and how does one do this without making somewhat of a tunnel effect on Carlton? That's a very critical issue. The mass and scale of this building is a big issue. But I, for one, would believe that there are conflicting goals that we're dealing with. And I don't know that we're in a position to settle those conflicting goals, and that's why I seconded the motion. That failed 3-3. We can now have another motion, which, for example, would be to send it back for redesign, and that would be fine. I would just ask, if we do that, we give as much specificity as we can so that when we vote on that, we will have had at least 4 people saying, yeah, that's the specificity I like. So when the applicant comes back and hopefully does what the specificity is, we can't say, yeah, but we didn't think of, well, we can do whatever we want, I suppose. But I'm just saying, in a sense of fairness, let's try to be as specific as we can. So that having been said, I will now invite some comments from the commission. What I'm really looking for here is a motion. The motion we had failed. We need another motion. Commissioner Sayoc.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. I move to what is the official word that I'm looking? I move to move this project.
I think it's to recommend.
I recommend. I move to recommend this.
No, I take it back. We can, yes, we can forward a recommendation for denial. That's on page 14.
Okay. I would like to continue the matter to a date certain with specific direction. And these are the directions that at least I thought I heard from the group. That the applicant come back with a different orientation where the 1 story is south of the project site so that it is adjacent to Los Gatos Village Square, and utilizing the larger length so that the applicant has the square footage he desires while trying to minimize the visual mass that it presents to Carlton Avenue as well as to Los Gatos Boulevard with regards to views of the hillside. Other specific direction is to look at additional community benefits such as traffic calming ideas for the neighborhood east of the project site. And well, I will leave it at that, see if I get a second, and see if I have additional comments. So.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Dallas, 4 seconds. Discussion?
Would we want to also recommend, because we're asked to in our report, input from the commission regarding uses would be helpful to the town council? Would we want to know more what the balance is, or what the balance they're thinking of for the uses? Or do we just leave it
I would prefer to keep it
to us?
I would prefer to keep, not even discuss it. I think the applicant made it clear that flexibility is key, considering the economic conditions that we're facing as well as future economics. So I'd rather keep that silent as for uses.
Although I hope that they heard the majority of the neighbors.
Absolutely. And I think what we could say is that all comments, uses or architectural elements, so to try and incorporate and listen to what the public comments have been.
Commissioner Sack, would you, I hate to ask you to do that, but I want to focus on what you're saying, and I'm not sure I was somewhere else in my mind. When
So far there was two specific directions. Orientation, flipping the one story, and second was looking at alternative or additional community benefit issues. The seconder had recommended and asked whether or not we wanted to make any mention of usage, and I said no, and I'll see if the seconder still seconds the motion.
I do.
Okay.
As long as you added your...
Let me ask this question. You want them to look at flipping it, and I understand that. Let us assume that in looking at it, they come up with another idea to address the same issue. Would you preclude that?
No. No, that's just one idea that was specifically presented, but certainly all ideas that the applicant considers and would like to bring forward would be welcomed.
Are there, Commissioner Erickson?
So let me ask you a question. So what can you articulate? I'm not trying to, I don't want to read your mind, but what are you wanting them to accomplish in the redesign that would contemplate flipping the building? Specifically, what do you want them to accomplish? I assume that you're not trying to dictate to them specific design of the building, but you're asking them to accomplish something. So what are you asking them to accomplish?
Two things that I heard that made me so intrigued with the idea was that it does provide a noise barrier, which was something that neighbors on Carlton Avenue found a significant issue. By having it flipped over, I guess that provides that barrier so that I guess the courtyard is north of the neighborhood. The other reason why I'm interested in looking at flipping it is the south side, the length of that is longer, so that the applicant in their design may be able to utilize more of that for additional square footage, so that the second story, or not to say that it cannot be second story, but the second story element on Carlton Avenue could somehow be reconfigured or changed so that it meets the setback that is necessary, and it might be changed so that it doesn't present such a strong wall for the neighborhood on Carlton Avenue.
Commissioner Bourgeois?
Thank you. I think I'm going to support the motion, and I appreciate the chair's clarification on being open to other creative solutions, having heard our input, because the intent of that when I first mentioned it was to gain square footage on the first story to somehow reduce the second story element, which would reduce the bulk and mass, which is what we're trying to get to. But again, that's kind of contrary to that connectivity idea. So even looking at a partial wrap and keeping the element on Gateway and doing a partial one-story wrap on the south side, I just think as long as it's not, this or the boomerang or nothing, and that we're open to creative solutions to get at the ultimate, which is a reduction in bulk and mass and that tunnel effect on Carlton, I would support the motion.
Other comments? I would say this. Obviously, I was in favor of the first motion. However, I think that Commissioner Sack is correct. It isn't unreasonable to say these are our concerns. We'd like to give you an opportunity to address those concerns, as long as we're not limiting them in how they address it. So I think I can support the motion, too. Other comments? If not, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I believe it's unanimous. Was anyone, did I misread that? Anyone wanted to vote no? It is unanimous. So the matter then needs a date certain to come back. Yes?
It's our suggestion that you may want to have the applicant come back up to talk about when they may be able to come back for a date certain.
All right, the suggestion is that since we're going to pick a date certain, and since this may be a big job and we don't know, we would invite Mr. Rodriguez to give us an estimate of how long it will take him to do the redesign. So when we set it, we can give you a reasonable opportunity. To that extent, I guess I'm opening the public hearing for that comment.
Yes. We would like to come back to, well, either April 22nd or May 13th. And I'm just wondering when we would need to get something in a couple weeks from now for April 22nd, I think, right?
The challenge, I think May 13th is probably a better date. We're probably going to have to do some additional traffic analysis depending on how that wrap is configured, because it's going to move the throat of the ingress down closer to the intersection, which may create other challenges. So I think May 13th is going to be the best date.
Okay, let's take that, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll close the public hearing again and choose that. May 13th, is that the date, as the date certain? So the motion then, which carried, was to have a redesign and have the applicant come back on May 13th. And I think that concludes that. So that finishes item 3. And all we have left would be, does Ms. Rooney have anything that she'd like to add?
No, I do not. Thank you.
All right. Do the commissioners have any commission matters? Yes, Commissioner Staff?
I just wanted to let the commission and staff know that I won't be present at the next meeting for, I guess it's April 8th. So.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, we are adjourned.